For millennia, China has held more secrets than any other land. Hidden beneath its mountains and rivers are cities, artifacts, and lost knowledge that defy logic and time. Today we will uncover the ancient mysteries of the Celestial Empire, where myth and history intersect. Please subscribe and like to support our project's growth. We hope you're ready for another journey through the centuries, as one of the most historically rich cultures holds many secrets. Buried city under Lake Fuxian. A foggy morning over Fuxian Lake often obscures the mirror-like surface beneath which, locals say, a legendary town slumbers. The water here is unusually clear and dark, as if absorbing all unnecessary sounds, and in this silence, one senses that streets and squares remain beneath the surface. Fishermen speak of stone lines in the depths as scars of time, and each year, rumors return with the seasonal winds. The first discoveries began to be discussed in the late 1990s, when divers accustomed to clear water stumbled upon sloping walls. The stones lay so perfectly aligned, as if they had been laid by experts, not nature. Someone spotted steps, someone else noted the correct angle of the platform, and talk of a sunken city emerged, like stories long hidden under a layer of silt and silence. The dives were repeated, and the logs began to contain similar descriptions: elongated rectangles resembling foundations, step terraces with neat edges, wide slabs jutting into darkness. Underwater video footage showed a geometry too regular to be the random force of nature, and it was precisely this regularity that became the main argument in favor of the artificiality of the formations on the seabed. When echolocation was added to the search, the contours formed a complete map. Long, straight lines, intersections at almost right angles, and platforms of varying heights. The lines seemed to suggest streets, and the rectangular patches formed neighborhoods. Thus arose the theory of an ancient settlement, submerged by slow coastal subsidence or a sudden tremor that split the eastern slope and opened a door to the frigid depths. Archaeologists have uncovered archives of the Dian Kingdom, whose legacy stretches through Yunnan's Bronze Age. Chronicles mention fortified hills, trade routes, and cult platforms where celestial omens and power were united. If a city truly lies on the lakebed, it may have been a port hub or a sanctuary that survived a series of floods until one particularly harsh season transformed the pier into a silent outcrop of stone. The most captivating thing about these structures is the masonry itself. The slabs fit together as if they were ground to perfection, and the corners hold their shape despite the water pressure and current. In some places, ledges resembling stairs and protrusions, seemingly intended for beams, are visible. The stone is local, but it's worked differently than that found on coastal structures, which only raises questions about its technology and purpose. Pottery fragments and fragments resembling net weights were found at the bottom, but no decisive artifacts were recovered. Perhaps the silt hid the most important items, or perhaps the residents managed to carry away their valuables upon noticing the rising waters. Or perhaps this wasn't a residential area, but a ritual platform and warehouse dominated by architecture, with few traces of everyday life. Attempts to date the stones by their accretion and comparison with coastal layers have yielded cautious estimates, reaching back to the early centuries BC and slightly later. Researchers caution, water changes the rules, dates shift, sediments float, and any certainty here is an assumption. But even these cautious formulas agree on one key point: the complex is ancient and therefore significant. Skeptics point to terraced farming and stone breakwaters. They claim the regular lines could have been coastal fortifications later absorbed by the lake. Proponents of the urban scenario point to the sheer number and connectivity of the structures. There are too many squares and intersections for a single coastal defense. Both camps agree on only one thing: this is a large complex, not a hastily designed one. Today, the lake guards its secret patiently and rigorously. Divers, like archivists, return to their marks, take new plans, check angles, and each time, the water reveals a small detail, but stubbornly holds on to the whole picture. The depths act like a display case. We see forms, but we don't hear their stories. And so, the city near Fuxian remains not only a discovery, but also a question that cannot yet be answered definitively. All that's left is to listen to the silence and read the geometry like text. The lines of the streets, if they are streets, weren't created by chance. The steps, if they are steps, led somewhere. The platforms, if they are platforms, received something. Perhaps one day, a low-water season and a new survey will complete the pattern. For now, evening falls over the lake, and it seems as if lights are igniting in the depths, not the reflection of stars, but the memory of a city that the waters couldn't erase. White Pyramid of Shanxi Province. In the heart of ancient China, among the soft hills of Shanxi Province, lies a secret whispered for centuries. Here, where the air is thick with the scent of dust and past empires, rises a hill that, upon closer inspection, is too perfect to be simply part of the landscape. This is the White Pyramid, a structure whose existence even Chinese scholars long denied, dismissing it as nothing more than a natural feature. But for those who saw it with their own eyes, there was no doubt. Before them stood not a miracle of nature, but the imprint of someone's grandiose will. The mystery's origins date back to the mid-1940s when an American pilot named James Gausman was flying a transport flight over northwestern China. He reported that below, among the mountain valleys, he spotted a gigantic structure with white edges glistening in the sun, as if the stone were coated with lime or clay. The pyramid was so large that its shadow stretched for many kilometers, and its shape was perfect, as if drawn from an invisible blueprint. Later, another pilot, Morris Sheehan, confirmed the sighting and even took several photographs, which became the basis for a debate that continues to this day. The photographs soon disappeared from public records, and Chinese authorities declared that there was no White Pyramid in the area. Instead, they showed a series of earthen mounds, the burial sites of emperors, scattered throughout the valley. However, the scale described by the pilots did not match any known monument. The White Pyramid, they claimed, surpassed the Great Pyramid of Giza, and its whiteness seemed to emanate not from the sand, but from the smooth-facing slabs, which reflected the light almost like a mirror. When satellite images became publicly available decades later, antiquities enthusiasts discovered that there were indeed several pyramidal structures in the vicinity of Xi'an. They were aligned strictly with the cardinal directions, and some formed complex groups, as if echoing star constellations. This reignited the theory of an ancient pyramid network, possibly temples or astronomical complexes predating the dynasties mentioned in history. Locals tell of ancient legends passed down from fathers to sons. They speak of a sky tomb built for a divine ruler who descended from the clouds and taught people to count time by the stars. After his passing, a light was lit beneath the mountain so that the ruler's spirit could observe the world. It is said that on certain nights, when viewed from a certain vantage point, a dim glow appears above the pyramid's summit, as if the earth itself remembers the one who once stood above it. Archaeologists, granted only partial access to the research, confirmed the presence of pyramidal mounds, but were denied access to the central sections. The official reason given is the religious and cultural significance of the burials, as in Chinese tradition, disturbing the peace of emperors is an insult not only to their ancestors, but also to the country itself. However, scientists privately admit that they still cannot explain the geometry of the structures and their orientation. Many pyramids are oriented north to within fractions of a degree, suggesting the use of astronomical instruments inappropriate for the era, when, according to chronicles, only simple clay mounds were built. Some researchers believe the White Pyramid may have been not a tomb, but an observatory. Its apex, according to calculations, perfectly aligns with the line along which the sun rises during certain periods of the year, and it's possible that the entire structure was part of a larger astronomical complex, with each facet reflecting a celestial cycle. Others see it as a sanctuary where rituals related to the Taoist quest for immortality were performed, with the color white symbolizing purity and the passage of the soul. There's a more daring theory. The pyramid is the remnant of an unknown civilization that predated Chinese culture. This is supported by fragments of smooth slabs whose composition doesn't match the known rocks of the region. Some believe these slabs could have been created artificially, using technologies lost along with the culture itself, leaving behind only a mute trace buried beneath the earth. Today, access to the area where the White Pyramid is supposedly located is strictly restricted. Tourists can only gaze from afar at the line of hills, each possibly hiding a secret. Fearing destruction, the Chinese authorities refuse to permit large-scale excavations, and so the legend lives on, suspended between science and faith. Scientists continue to debate, and satellites occasionally record mysterious shadows, as if the pyramid itself appears only to those willing to believe. Yet one thought haunts researchers. If the White Pyramid truly exists as eyewitnesses described it, then humanity stands on the threshold of a discovery that could rewrite history. Perhaps a witness to an era forgotten in chronicles sleeps underground, and when this stone speaks, it will speak not of the dead, but of those who came too soon. Mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Somewhere in the hills of Shanxi province, beneath soft layers of red earth, lies a piece that no one has dared to disturb for over 2,000 years. This is a place where Chinese history takes on the guise of legend, where power becomes eternity. The Mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to unify the country and create a state capable of enduring the ages. He died, but his shadow still casts a shadow over the entire celestial empire, for the very monument to his power remains untouched, as if waiting for anyone who dares to look into its heart. The mausoleum had long been known, but it only truly became known to the world in 1974, when peasants digging a well stumbled upon the clay head of a warrior. More fragments followed, and soon an army was discovered underground. Tens of thousands of figures, each with its own individual face, each seemingly breathing, ready to rise at the slightest command. Thus, humanity learned of the terracotta army, the stone mirror of the imperial dream. But behind this army lies an equally enigmatic figure, the imperial mausoleum itself, which no one has reached and perhaps will not reach for a long time. Archaeologists have determined that construction of this underground world began when Shi Huang was only 13 years old. 700,000 workers were brought in from all corners of the country. They dug the earth, cut stone, dug canals, and created an entire city beneath the surface. According to ancient chronicles, the mausoleum was constructed as a miniature version of China. Mountains of bronze, rivers of mercury, palaces and towers of precious metals. The ceiling, chroniclers wrote, was set with pearls representing stars so that the emperor could rule under the same sky after death as he had ruled in life. But the most mysterious thing is that no one has ever seen these stars. The mausoleum's central chamber remains sealed. Modern technology allows us to explore only the outer layers, and even these are staggering in their scale. The underground complex covers an area of approximately 56 square kilometers. It is an entire underground world in which one man rests, and it is precisely this grandeur, mingled with mystery, that leads researchers to say that Shi Huangdi wanted to conquer not only death, but time itself. The chronicles of the ancient historian Sima Qian, written 100 years after the emperor's death, mention rivers of mercury flowing within the tomb. For a long time, this was considered a metaphor, a beautiful image symbolizing eternity. But in the 20th century, when geologists began taking measurements, instruments showed elevated levels of mercury vapor directly above the central mound. This confirmed that the chronicler's words could be literal. Perhaps somewhere below, a metallic sea truly flows, shifting in the darkness under the weight of centuries. The very idea of such rivers is astonishing. To create such an effect, the craftsmen had to cast thousands of liters of mercury and channel it through the canals, like blood through veins. Mercury is a poisonous substance that requires caution, meaning the builders worked under mortal risk. Legend has it that those who knew the mausoleum's structure were buried with it, so that the mystery would remain unsolved. Historians estimate that the number of those who perished was no less than the number of those who built it. When archaeologists attempted to approach the center, they discovered that even the approaches were guarded by an engineering system that was far from primitive. According to the researchers, the walls were reinforced with bronze, the ceilings were vaulted to distribute the load, and some sections were complex labyrinths. Ancient records also mention traps, strung crossbows, ready to fire at the slightest movement. Modern scanners cannot penetrate dense layers of soil and clay saturated with minerals, so scientists prefer not to take risks. One careless move could destroy the inner chamber and priceless artifacts. However, even at a distance from the tomb's center, mysteries abound. The terracotta army is only a small part of the complex, but it has already demonstrated that the skills of Qin dynasty craftsmen were far greater than commonly believed. Each figure was handcrafted, with individual facial features. The bodies are clad in bronze armor, and in their hands they wield weapons long considered decorative. But modern research has shown that the swords and spears are coated with a special chromium layer that protects the metal from rust. This technology, according to chemists, only appeared in Europe in the 20th century. How it arose in ancient China remains a question no one has answered. It has been suggested that the mausoleum was conceived not simply as a resting place, but as a vehicle for the confluence of power, science, and mysticism. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, who strove for immortality, is known for his attempts to create an elixir of eternal life. He was surrounded by alchemists and Taoist priests, who believed that death could be cheated through a combination of metals, minerals, and earthly energy. Some researchers believe that the tomb's design is not merely symbolic, but an attempt to put these beliefs into practice. Streams of mercury could symbolize the flow of life force, and the metal vaults a closed system in which the emperor's body would be preserved beyond time. According to legend, Qin Shi Huang's sarcophagus lies in the center of an underground palace, surrounded by multi-level corridors and enclosed chambers. A pearl-colored ceiling gleams above the vaults, and a sea of mercury flows beneath the floor. Despite technological advances, many archaeologists admit that opening this chamber is currently impossible. Equipment could disrupt the balance, air could destroy the pigments, and the chemical reaction of the mercury could render the space deadly. But this caution stems not only from science, but also from fear of the unknown. In China, it is said that the emperor's peace is guarded by spirits, and anyone who tries to disturb his sleep will suffer the same fate as those who perished during construction. The Chinese government has officially banned any attempts to open the mausoleum, and the mausoleum remains untouched, like a frozen world sealed within the earth. Today, a museum complex sprawls around the hill where Shi Huangdi rests, but the central section is fenced off. Visitors see only the outer contours, a symbol reminding them that beneath their feet lies not just a tomb, but an entire empire, frozen between life and death. When the morning mist rises from the plain, it settles on the hill like the breath of antiquity, and it seems as if a hum still emanates from beneath the earth, the sound of an invisible mechanism, working through the centuries. The mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang remains archaeology's greatest unsolved problem. It remains unopened not because they can't, but because they dare not. Where history and myth intersect, there always remains a fine line, and perhaps it is precisely this line that holds humanity back from confronting its own past. For, as the ancients say, some doors must remain closed until a time comes that can withstand their truth. The terracotta army is an army not created by humans. When archaeologists first came face to face with thousands of clay warriors standing in battle formation underground, they felt not delight, but alarm. Each figure gazed forward, and even 2,000 years later, it seemed as if these soldiers were not simply frozen in silence, but awaiting orders. The Terracotta Army, as it was later named, became a symbol of the greatness of the Qin Empire. But the more researchers delved into the details, the more they sensed that its origins were far from as obvious as they might have liked to believe. Each pit beneath the Lintong Plain contains its own world. Warriors stand in rows. Between them are wooden chariots, horses, officers, and archers. Each is life-size, and each has its own face, its own features, its own character. No duplicates. Even the ears and folds of the lips are distinct, as in living people. Some figures smile, others stare coldly. Still others seem to be holding their breath. Such diversity is not typical of the mass production of antiquity. It suggests either incredible artistic individuality or something more, access to technology capable of capturing real faces. When specialists began analyzing the clay's structure, they discovered a rare mixture of quartz, feldspar, and mica, bonded at high temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. This wasn't just fired ceramics, but a material remarkably close to modern industrial composites. The clay was free of all organic impurities, and its internal structure was fired uniformly. This quality is only possible with temperature control, which ancient charcoal-fired kilns couldn't provide. Even more bizarre was the surface coating of the figures. A thin layer of varnish and pigments not only imparted color, but also protected the material from moisture and mold. Chemical analysis revealed the presence of compounds resembling synthetic resins. Scientists were long in disbelief. Technology of this level should have appeared only in the 20th century. But the layer existed, and its origin remains controversial. Some believe the Qin masters possessed the secret of mineral mixtures that were lost after the fall of the dynasty. Others believe the source of this knowledge may have been much more ancient. Ancient chronicles contain a strange entry. From the clay that breathes, warriors were created, capable of standing forever. The phrase might have seemed poetic, if not for one circumstance. Several figures raised from the earth literally began to crumble upon contact with air, as if losing their internal tension. This led to the theory that the statues were created under specific pressure, perhaps using primitive forms of pressing or even vacuum firing. For the time, this sounds like science fiction, but similar effects are known today in industrial ceramics. Each terracotta army statue has a hollow body and a solid head, joined so precisely that the seams are invisible. The internal cavities ensure a balance of mass and strength, as if the figures were designed using engineering load-bearing principles. Even the footplates distribute the weight at an angle that prevents the statue from cracking under its own weight. By comparison, most sculptures of the period would crumble at the slightest ground movement, but these stand as if reinforced from within by an invisible framework. When archaeologists first cleaned the soldiers' faces, they were struck by the realistic quality of the eyes. The pupils are not mere indentations, but microscopic funnels, creating the illusion of a gaze. By torchlight, the eyes seem to follow every movement. Modern restorers admit that even with computer modeling, achieving this effect is extremely difficult. One gets the sense that the artists possessed a knowledge of human anatomy and optics that didn't yet exist as a science. One of the most controversial discoveries concerns weapons. When experts removed the bronze swords and spearheads, they were sharp and shiny, as if they had been forged yesterday. Research revealed that the metal was coated with a thin oxide film containing traces of chromium. Chromium was not used at all in the ancient world. Its insulating properties were only discovered in the last century. How Qin masters could have applied the chromium coating without electricity or chemical reactors remains a mystery. The theory of chance has been dismissed. The layer was applied uniformly, indicating a controlled process. Some archaeologists believe the terracotta army is not just a work of art, but part of a much more complex mechanism. Traces of metal parts resembling guides or supports were discovered beneath the platforms where the figures stand. Perhaps the warriors stood not simply on the ground, but on a platform designed for movement. According to ancient legends, the emperor desired that his army accompany him in the afterlife just as they had in life. Perhaps the engineers of the time actually attempted to literally realize this idea, to create a moving symbol of eternal strength. Taoist treatises found in neighboring regions mention the art of animating form. They speak of clay absorbing breath and breath retained in the vessel. Modern researchers tend to see this as a metaphor, but some suggest that breath referred to the process of injecting gas or air into the figurines during firing, which gave the material strength. If this is true, the technology of the terracotta army was thousands of years ahead of its time. There's also a mystical side to the story. At night, when fog descends on the plain, the complex's guards claim to hear dull thuds from beneath the earth, like someone slowly walking. Perhaps these are simply the sounds of groundwater, but the people believe the army still stands guard, protecting the emperor's peace. People leave offerings at the entrance, rice, incense, and coins, hoping the warriors won't emerge from the darkness. Scientific research continues, but the mystery deepens with each passing year. Even modern tomography can't accurately determine how many more figures are hidden underground, or how deep the entire complex extends. Scientists cautiously speculate on hundreds of thousands of sculptures, but confirmed data is scarcer. It is hypothesized that the army is arranged not in a single plane, but in tiers, and that another layer, perhaps officers or chariots, may be concealed beneath the soldiers already discovered. The terracotta army is more than just a marvel of art. It's a mystery that fuses engineering, chemistry, philosophy, and the cult of eternal power. No one knows who the masters were who created the clay faces, or where their knowledge disappeared after the emperor's death. But anyone who looks into the eyes of these warriors senses that they are not looking at statues, but at the imprint of something greater, the trace of a mind capable of transforming matter into life. And while humanity searches for the answer, the army stands motionless beneath the weight of centuries. Its silence holds not just peace, but a warning, because perhaps the secret of this army lies not in how it was made, but in why. The Shaolin tunnels are a network that runs beneath the mountains. On the northern slopes of Henan province, where thick fog obscures ancient pine trees, rises a monastery known throughout the world. Shaolin is a symbol of martial arts, spiritual discipline, and legends in which the line between reality and myth has long since dissolved. But few people know that beneath the stone courtyards and monastery halls lies not just a foundation, but a whole network of passages, corridors, and halls extending deep underground. These underground tunnels have become one of the most mysterious legacies of ancient China, their existence mentioned only in whispers by monks, as something not to be disturbed without good reason. The tunnel's history dates back to a time when the monastery was not only a spiritual center, but also a fortress. According to ancient chronicles, the first tunnels were dug during the Northern Wei dynasty, around the 5th century AD. Back then, monks were not only preachers, but also protectors, and when temples burned, they went underground to save scrolls, herbs, and weapons. Over time, the network expanded, connecting various monastery halls, rock caves, and even remote valleys. But the deeper the passages went, the less was written about them. It was as if the monks had begun to build not just a shelter, but something more, a system whose meaning only the initiated understood. During restoration of the monastery in the 20th century, workers accidentally discovered a passage hidden behind a wall. Beyond the narrow opening, a stone corridor began, leading downwards, where the air was dry and still. The hand-hewn walls were covered in barely visible symbols and traces of soot. Round stone slabs lay on the floor, which, as it later turned out, contained drainage channels. Everything looked as if the site had been designed not hastily, but with an engineering precision rare in antiquity. The corridor stretched for hundreds of meters, gradually disappearing into the darkness. And when researchers returned with instruments, they discovered that it was only part of a vast network extending beneath the mountain. Some passages led to halls carved directly into the rock. They contained altar niches, the remains of wooden frames, and stone benches, which archaeologists believed monks might have used for meditation. However, one room stunned everyone, a round chamber with a perfectly formed vault and domed ceiling. Symbols reminiscent of ancient mantras graced the walls, and a central depression resembling a fire pit. Scientists theorized that this was an underground observatory, or ritual hall. But why such complex structures were needed underground in a monastery built for prayer and combat training remained a mystery. According to some monastery records, the tunnels served more than just shelter. One ancient treatise mentions a path to the heart of the mountain, where monks found inner light. Perhaps special practices requiring solitude, silence, and isolation from the world were conducted here. Buddhist texts say that the darkness and depths of the earth symbolize the path to enlightenment, and underground halls could be used for meditation in absolute darkness, when the boundary between body and mind disappears. But folk legends are far more sinister. They speak of a gate leading to a mirror underground that could reveal the past and future. When modern researchers attempted to map the underground system, they discovered that the passages formed a distinct geometric pattern. Their directions coincide with the cardinal directions, and some corridors extend to peaks known to have housed ancient pagodas. A theory has emerged that the tunnels may have been used as a kind of resonator stone, amplifying sound vibrations. At certain points, if a mantra is recited, the echo returns within a few seconds with astonishing clarity, as if the walls were resonating with living breath. This may have been done intentionally to harness the sound energy in breathing and concentration practices. Archaeologists descending deeper encountered even stranger phenomena. In one passage, compasses began to drift, and instruments recorded fluctuations in the magnetic field, despite there being no metal sources nearby. In another, the air remained surprisingly fresh, as if a ventilation system were hidden somewhere. Some scholars have suggested that the tunnels are connected to underground air currents, and that the builders use natural shafts, expanding them to create a system reminiscent of modern utility tunnels. However, calculations have shown that this would have required a knowledge of geology and mathematics beyond the capabilities of ordinary monks of the time. Legends claim that deeper, beyond the final chamber, lies the heart of the mountain, a stone circle with a hingeless door. No explorer has ever found it, but descriptions have been passed down through the centuries. These stories say the door opens only at dawn on a certain day, when a ray of sunlight enters a crack in the rock's summit and glides through underground corridors, reaching the desired point. This sounds like a myth, but similar lighting systems are known in the temples of Machu Picchu and Egyptian sanctuaries. Perhaps Shaolin harbors the same idea, the union of light and stone, heaven and earth. Modern Chinese authorities have restricted access to the monastery's lower levels, citing the risk of collapse. But the few who managed to descend before the closure claim to have felt a strange hum, not the sound of water or the echo of footsteps, but a low, vibrating sound, like a distant roar. Some attribute it to geological causes, others to the effect of standing waves. However, the monks, upon hearing these stories, simply bow and say it is the breath of the mountain. The underground tunnels of Shaolin remain one of the most enigmatic architectural systems of ancient China. Their purpose remains unknown, their age is uncertain, and to this day, no one knows where the network ends. Perhaps it extends beneath neighboring ridges, or perhaps it ends in a subterranean chamber, untouched for 1,000 years. But, as the oldest monks say, some paths weren't built for the feet, they were intended for the spirit. When the last lamps dim in the monastery and night falls, a faint ringing seems to rise from deep within the earth, as if subterranean metal responding to the breath of the wind. And then, you can't help but realize that the legends of Shaolin are not only stories of warriors, but also of the land that preserves their silence. Longyu Caves, an impossible underground construction of antiquity. In southeastern China, in Zhejiang province, beneath the green rice fields lies a mystery that neither engineers nor archaeologists have yet been able to explain. These are the Longyu Caves, 24 enormous stone chambers connected by narrow passages carved out of a sandstone monolith. They were discovered completely by accident in the summer of 1992, when a farmer named Wu An-ai decided to drain a small pond near his home. Instead of the expected clay and sand, he found smooth walls descending at a right angle and steps leading into darkness. Thus began the story of one of China's most incredible archaeological mysteries, one that challenged all notions of ancient human capabilities. When archaeologists first descended into the dungeon, they were astonished by its scale. Each hall was approximately 30 meters high, and some exceeded 1,000 square meters in area. The walls and ceilings were perfectly level, as if carved by a giant chisel. But what most astonished the scientists was the pattern on the walls. The entire surface was covered with parallel lines, drawn with incredible precision, as if someone had gone over the stone with a modern grinding tool. These lines are not chaotic. They form a unified pattern, running uninterrupted from floor to ceiling, as if the work had been carried out under a strict design and a single direction. Over the years of exploration, 24 such caves have been discovered, but the most astonishing thing is that not a single ancient Chinese document mentions them. There's no mention in chronicles, no legends, no records of construction. This silence is astonishing. Such a project would have required the labor of thousands of people, decades of work, and enormous resources, yet history has preserved no trace of its creators. Scientists search for traces of tools, fires, debris, pottery, anything that might indicate human presence, but the caves were completely clean, as if someone had carefully erased all traces after completing the work. Calculations indicate that to create even one such cave, at least 1 million cubic meters of stone had to be excavated. If this was done by hand, how did the ancient builders lift and remove such a mass of rock without leaving any traces of waste? No storage site has been found either nearby or in the surrounding mountains. It seems the stone simply disappeared. Some researchers have suggested it may have been used to build unknown structures, perhaps now destroyed. Others believe the stone was transported through underground canals that have yet to be discovered. Among the many hypotheses, one of the most daring posits that the Longyu Caves are not a storage facility or a dwelling, but a gigantic energy or ritual complex. This theory is supported by the strange acoustic properties of the chambers. When a person makes a sound in the center of the cave, the echo returns in a perfectly pure rhythm, as if the space were calibrated to a specific frequency. In some chambers, the sound is amplified to the point of vibrating the bones, and many researchers have noted a feeling of slight dizziness, as if the space itself were affecting the body. Archaeologists have attempted to determine the age of the caves using sediment samples and biological inclusions. The results vary, but most agree that the structures are over 2,000 years old, dating them to the late Qin or early Han dynasty. However, the level of engineering precision in stonework far exceeds anything known about the technology of the time. Neither China nor other regions of the ancient world have comparable underground carvings of such scale. Even Egyptian tombs, crafted with the utmost care, cannot compare to the geometric symmetry of the Longyu halls. Researchers discovered rare markings on the walls, short indentations resembling carvings, but too shallow to be writing. Some resemble symbols found on ancient bronzes from the Dayan dynasty, while others are geometric patterns reminiscent of star maps. Perhaps this was a symbolic language understood only by the complex's creators, or traces of instruments used to measure angles and directions. It has even been suggested that the entire ornamentation is a code or an ancient form of knowledge recording, lost along with the culture that built these halls. Locals have long told a legend that gods from heaven hid in these caves. They descended to earth in shining chariots and ordered people to carve a house out of the rock to preserve the fires of heaven. After completing the work, the gods departed, and the caves remained as a reminder of their presence. When the peasants first descended, they reported smelling iron and a damp wind, as if passages to as-yet undiscovered chambers were opening somewhere deeper. Later, divers exploring the underground reservoirs below the caves did indeed discover narrow crevices leading into the unknown, but due to the risk of collapse, no one dared to enter. There are also more mundane theories. Some Chinese archaeologists believe that Longyu could have served as a grand granary during the early empires. The dry climate and constant temperature made such underground warehouses ideal. However, this theory clashes with the undeniable fact that no traces of stored crops, neither grains nor charred remains, have been found anywhere. Furthermore, the overly ornate decoration of the walls and the complete lack of utilitarian features contradict the idea of a simple warehouse. Engineers who analyzed the carving technique noted that the parallel lines on the walls appear to be the result of using a large cutting tool with constant force, something difficult to achieve by hand. Some lines are at precisely 30-degree angles, and the distance between them is consistent. Achieving this effect would require a device capable of uniform vertical movement, like a modern mechanical cutter. This has led to the hypothesis that primitive machines or mechanisms were used, perhaps powered by water or muscle power. Despite dozens of expeditions and thousands of hours of research, no single hypothesis explains everything. Who, when, and why created this underground world remains unknown. Scientists compare Longyu to other mysterious structures around the world. The pyramids of Egypt, the stone platforms of Baalbek, and the ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia. All are striking in the precision of their stonework and the lack of answers. But Longyu stands out even among them, perfectly preserved and utterly silent from history. Today, the caves are open to visitors, but only a portion are accessible to tourists. The rest remain closed, too dangerous and too unclear. Chinese authorities have restricted exploration, fearing the structure will be damaged, as it is unknown how the rock will behave if its equilibrium is disturbed. For now, silence and cold reign below, as if the earth itself is guarding something that should not be revealed prematurely. And when you stand in the center of one of the halls, where a beam of light glides across thousands of carved lines, creating a sense of movement in the stone, a strange feeling arises, as if this world was created not for humans, but for something greater, for beings who understood energy and form in a way we have yet to learn. Longyu remains a monument to the impossible, proof that antiquity knew more about stone and silence than we can imagine. The copper discs of Bangkar are evidence of forgotten technologies. In the highlands of Qinghai province, where the rare air mixes with the winds of the Tibetan plateau, archaeologists discovered something that changed our understanding of ancient crafts. Among the rocks and dusty plains of Bainkara lay dozens of round metal discs, covered in incomprehensible symbols and uniform grooves. Their surfaces gleamed in the sunlight, as if the copper had been polished yesterday. But according to researchers, the artifacts were over several thousand years old, and their purpose remains a mystery. The first mention of the discs appeared in the late 1930s, when a Tibetan expedition led by Chinese archaeologist Zhang Rui stumbled upon underground caves. Inside were the remains of small humans, animal bones, and numerous copper plates, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter. Each plate had a perfect geometry and a central hole, as if they were ancient records or elements of an unknown mechanism. Spiral lines ran along the edges, gradually converging toward the center, reminiscent of the grooves of a gramophone record. Scientists immediately noted that the disc's shape was too precise for primitive tools. Some surfaces were engraved with microscopic symbols resembling writing, but none of the known Chinese or Tibetan languages matched them. Under a microscope, the lines appeared smooth, as if machine-made. Such carving technology did not exist even in the late Bronze Age. Researchers hypothesized that metal etching with acids or electrolytes was used, a method that humanity only mastered in modern times. The alloy's composition proved no less mysterious. In addition to copper and tin, the discs contained traces of rare elements, iridium, nickel, and manganese. This combination makes the material extremely durable and corrosion-resistant. Even after thousands of years, the surface remained uncovered by a green patina. This indicated a high level of metallurgy unknown to the early civilizations of Central Asia. Some physicists have suggested that the alloy may have possessed paramagnetic properties, capable of responding to electromagnetic fields. When the first finds arrived in Beijing, they were subjected to spectral analysis. The results were shocking. The metal melted at temperatures exceeding the capabilities of ancient furnaces. A theory emerged that the discs could have been part of an ancient generator or device for transmitting sound and energy. Proponents of this theory pointed to the spiral engraving and central hole as elements reminiscent of modern induction coils. Opponents of this theory argued that the shape was purely aesthetic and could have had religious significance. Similar discs were later found in Sichuan and Gansu. Their patterns were almost identical, as if they had been manufactured using the same standard. Some of the finds contained traces of resin, similar to glue, and signs of melting, suggesting the use of high temperatures. One disc was fractured, and at the crack, researchers observed microscopic quartz crystals embedded in the metal structure. This combination could have contributed to conductivity, further reinforcing suspicions of the artifact's technological origin. Local folk legends tell of sound stones that sang when they touched. Elders claimed that they were used by ancient heavenly teachers who came from beyond the mountains, and that these circles preserved their words. When archaeologists attempted experiments, they discovered that when rubbed, two discs indeed produced a subtle ringing sound, depending on the force of contact. The frequency of the sound was consistently consistent across different specimens, as if the material were designed to produce a specific resonant wave. Some researchers have proposed a rational explanation. The discs may have been part of an astronomical instrument. When viewed in oblique light, they reveal dots and lines forming patterns reminiscent of constellations. This may have been a system for tracking time or eclipses. However, later finds with identical patterns but without any astronomical symbols have disproved this theory. It's possible that they were cult objects associated with the belief in the power of metal. In the 1950s, rumors circulated that some of the discs had disappeared from government archives. Several specimens later appeared in private collections, and it was on these that physicists conducted new measurements. One of the discs, placed in a magnetic field, emitted a faint vibrational hum, as if it were actually carrying an internal current. The scientists attributed this to an electrostatic effect, but the result remained recorded. Today, the Bangkar discs occupy a special place among archaeological mysteries. They cannot be precisely dated, their purpose is unknown, and the material remains difficult to reproduce even with modern methods. Chinese historians cautiously refer to them as ritual plaques to avoid speculation. But even in academic circles, many acknowledge that these artifacts do not fit into any known era. Local monks still believe that a vault containing thousands of such discs exists beneath the mountains, and that those who find it will be able to hear the breath of the stars. Perhaps this is simply a beautiful metaphor, but standing among the Bangkara hills, where the air rings with the wind, it's easy to believe that these discs once truly did sound, conveying something we no longer perceive. Copper circles, created by hands or forces whose knowledge has long since disappeared, continue to hold within themselves a mystery equal to their form, closed, perfect, and silent. Ancient Han Dynasty mechanisms, clocks capable of measuring the stars. A small bronze fragment, barely larger than a human palm, is housed in the archives of the Beijing Museum. At first glance, it resembles part of a broken ornament, but its structure contains teeth, axles, and tiny holes for fastenings. Archaeologists discovered this artifact in Hubei province among ruins dating back to the Han Dynasty, approximately 2,000 years ago. For a long time, no one could figure out what it was until the engineer Sun Zi noticed its similarity in shape to the planetary gears of modern clocks. From that moment on, the story of mysterious mechanisms capable of measuring not time, but the movement of the stars began. In ancient China, astronomy was more than just a science. It was considered the language of the gods. The Han emperors placed great importance on celestial observations, as the fate of the empire was believed to depend on them. Grand observatories, bronze spheres, and water clocks were built for this purpose. But the Hubei find proved far more complex than any known instrument. Under a microscope, archaeologists discovered perfectly cut teeth with uniform pitch, crafted with a tolerance of less than 1/10 of a millimeter. Such precision, it was believed, was only achieved by humanity in the age of mechanical engineering. When engineers reconstructed the fragment, they discovered that it could rotate several gears simultaneously, transmitting motion in a complex pattern. Simulations revealed that the device could reproduce the cycles of the moon and sun, indicating when certain stars would appear in the sky. Moreover, the rotation occurred at a consistent rhythm, as if the mechanism were driven by water or drops of oil, as in later clepsydras. But even the most sophisticated ancient water clocks lacked such a synchronization system. Tiny markings, dots and lines arranged in a circle, were preserved on the fragment's outer rim. There were 128 of them, and they precisely matched the divisions of the Chinese calendar, which used a combination of 12 terrestrial branches and 10 celestial stems. This meant the device could have been used to calculate astronomical events and possibly predict solar and lunar eclipses. Scholars have given it the code name Celestial Calculator. However, the most mysterious aspect is the manufacturing method. The metal had an unusual composition, bronze with small amounts of silver and lead, which ensured softness during casting and high strength after cooling. The surface of the parts was polished to a mirror shine, and the marks of machining indicated a rotary motion of the tool. This led researchers to believe that ancient craftsmen used not only hammers and files, but also primitive lathes. There is no mention of such devices in Chinese texts. In the early 2000s, a team of engineers from Tianjin University attempted to create an exact replica of the mechanism using methods available during the Han Dynasty. It took them 3 years to reproduce the parts by hand, and even then, the precision of the work was significantly lower than the original. Some elements had to be adjusted under a microscope, something impossible in ancient times. This raised the question, where did the knowledge of such technologies come from? Some attributed it to the influence of Western artisans, while others suggested the transmission of lost knowledge from civilizations that existed before recorded history. Han-era treatises contain references to bronze spheres where water moves the sky. Scholars long considered these to be metaphors, until archaeologists discovered fragments of pipes and reservoirs resembling hydraulic systems near a Luoyang tomb. When combined with the gears found, they create a model of a mechanical celestial globe capable of rotating a star map based on the flow of water. This principle is similar to devices described in ancient Greek texts, but the Chinese version dates back considerably earlier. Some experts argue that this is an early analog of the Antikythera mechanism found in the Mediterranean, but created independently. The Chinese may have developed their own system for measuring the cosmos, based not on mathematics, but on the observation of cycles. Each gear in the Han mechanism corresponded to a specific celestial movement, one to the sun, another to the moon, and a third to Jupiter, which was considered a symbol of power. When the mechanism operated, its movement resembled the breathing of the universe, even endless, echoing the rhythm of the stars. Archaeologists have also found other devices, bronze figures that rotated under the pressure of water, mechanical birds that flapped their wings, and chariots that maintained their direction regardless of how they turned, the first prototypes of gyroscopes. All of these were created around the same time, as if knowledge beyond its time had suddenly emerged in China. Then it vanished, fading into history, leaving only mysterious fragments. Today, the discovered mechanisms are carefully guarded, but their purpose remains unclear. They may have been part of temple complexes where scholars observed the stars. Or perhaps they were instruments for rituals where heaven and power were united through bronze and movement. Chinese chronicles say that Emperor Guanwu, observing the device, said, "When water moves the sky, man understands the way of the gods." These words have become a symbol of the fine line between science and mysticism. Even today, looking at ancient gears, it seems they could come to life. Just a drop of water needs to fall into the bronze vessel again, and set the wheel measuring the stars in motion, just as they did 2,000 years ago, when people still believed that time and space were one breath. Stone warriors from Sichuan are the guardians of the gates to the underworld. In southwest China, where mountain peaks disappear into white mist and valleys are filled with the whisper of ancient rivers, archaeologists have discovered a place the Chinese themselves call a city carved from stone. In Sichuan province near Anshun County lies a necropolis composed of hundreds of stone statues, all gazing down into the earth. Each figure is carved from a monolith, and most face the same direction, the foot of a mountain, beneath which, locals believe, lies the gateway to the underworld. The discovery first came to light in the early 1990s, when geologists exploring the soil came across strange rock protrusions. After cleaning them, it became clear that these were not just simple boulders, but carefully carved figures of people, horses, and animals. Some were as tall as a human, while others towered 3 meters above the researchers. All had distinct facial features, folded hands, and similarly calm postures. On the chests of some were carved symbols resembling writing, but none of them could be deciphered. When experts radiocarbon dated the layers surrounding the statues, the results pointed to the Western Han Dynasty, approximately 2,000 years ago. However, the style of the images did not correspond to any known artistic movement of the time. The sculptures appeared too anatomically accurate, as if their creators had a detailed knowledge of the proportions of the human body. Some figures had slit pupils, meticulously carved nails, and even folds of fabric in their clothing. All of this created the impression that the artists were not simply depicting people, but striving to make them eternal so that they would continue to exist after death. Archaeologists discovered that beneath each group of statues were stone sarcophagi, but there were no remains inside. Instead of bones, there was a void, sometimes sealed with a thin layer of sand or ash. This sparked debate. Were the warriors tombstones, guardians, or symbols of spirits guiding souls? Some scholars have suggested that they were guardians of a sanctuary built on the site of an ancient volcano. Others are convinced that they represent a kind of ritual replica of an army created to protect the gates of the underworld. The main mystery lies in the technology. The stone from which the statues were carved is extremely dense, granodiorite, similar in hardness to quartz. Even modern chisels barely leave a mark on it, and the figures are not only carved with perfect precision, but also polished to a high shine. On some surfaces, traces of processing are visible, resembling parallel lines, as if they were ground with a rotating tool. Laboratories in Sichuan province have confirmed that these marks could not have been made by hand with a chisel. All ancient local legends say that people of stone came from the light. They appeared after thunder and an earthquake, and since then have guarded the passage to the underworld. Legends also mention the day the sky opened, perhaps a remembrance of an ancient volcanic explosion or meteorite impact. Some archaeologists seriously speculate that the complex may have been erected later on the site of the catastrophe to seal the Earth's wound. In this case, the statues symbolized guardian spirits who hold the energy of the depths. Underground scanning conducted in the 2000s revealed the presence of voids beneath several of the figures. They extended to a depth of approximately 10 meters and connected in the shape of a cross. In one of them, instruments recorded anomalous reflections resembling metallic objects. However, excavation of these sections was prohibited as the Chinese government feared damaging the unique monument. The reason for the figures' arrangement and what lies beneath them remains unknown. The eyes of the stone warriors attracted particular attention. In certain lighting, they reflect light as if crystals were embedded in them. Research has confirmed the presence of a thin layer of a mineral similar to obsidian. Perhaps this was an attempt to imitate pupils, but the effect was so striking that in the evening sun, it seems as if the warriors were looking at each other with living eyes. Locals avoid visiting the site at night, claiming that in the darkness they can hear a muffled ringing sound, similar to the sound of metal striking stone. Some modern historians see in these figures a reflection of the ancient Taoist cult of immortals. It was said that the true path of the soul lies not upward but downward, to the center of the earth, where the seed of new life lies. Perhaps the statues served as symbolic guardians, protecting the spirit's path from the world of the living. But there are also bolder theories. According to some researchers, the complex may have been part of an underground observatory. The placement of the figures coincides with the projections of several bright stars, Altair, Deneb, and Vega, which formed the famous summer triangle. This pattern gave rise to the idea that the stone warriors were not only guardians, but also conduits, connecting Earth with heaven. Perhaps, through their arrangement, ancient sages attempted to recreate a map of the stars, believing that the warriors' souls would be able to follow these lines into eternity. Thus, the entire necropolis represented not just a cemetery, but a cosmic diagram frozen in stone. Today, this site is little known to the general public. Chinese authorities restrict visits, and researchers work under strict supervision. But even among archaeologists, opinions are divided. Some believe this is the tomb of a high-ranking military leader, while others believe it is a cult monument of an unknown religion. Yet neither theory fully explains why the figures are facing the mountain or why their faces resemble real people. When the sun disappears behind the Sichuan mountains, the shadows of the statues fall upon the ground like rows of silent sentries. The evening breeze glides between them, creating a barely audible rustle, and it seems as if the stone soldiers still stand guard. They have seen the passing of empires, reigns, and wars, yet remain unchanged. And perhaps this is precisely their secret, the silence that has outlived all who have tried to understand who or what they guard beneath the eternal Chinese sky. The golden mask of Sanxingdui is the face of the forgotten gods. On the plains of Sichuan province, where green hills gently slope into lowlands, archaeologists once stumbled upon traces of a civilization unknown in China. In 1929, a farmer digging an irrigation canal discovered a bronze statue of a strange creature with an elongated face and enormous eyes. It was later discovered that this was only a small part of a vast complex now known as Sanxingdui, a city that vanished long before the advent of the dynasties, leaving behind only fragments of masks, figurines, and artifacts unlike anything ever created by man. The complex's main mystery was a golden mask found in one of the sacrificial pits. It was exquisitely crafted, but the facial proportions defied all known canons. The eyes were elongated horizontally and tilted upward. The mouth was compressed into a narrow line, and the ears were long, as if designed to hear non-human speech. It seemed to be a portrait not of a human being, but of a being of another nature. Archaeologists long debated whether the mask depicted a spirit, a king, or a god, but found no definitive answer. Some researchers claimed the mask represented the Lord of the Sky, a being who observed the human world. The mask's gold was unusual. Analysis revealed a purity of over 99%, impossible for the technology of the time. The surface was polished to a mirror shine, and the lines were so fine they were visible only under a microscope. The casting technique was more complex than thought possible for the Bronze Age. Its creators clearly possessed not only skill, but also an understanding of the laws of light. The face reflects the sun's rays, so that the eyes appear to glow from within. This has led to the hypothesis that the mask was used in solar rituals. In 2020, archaeologists discovered new pits containing artifacts, bronze figures over 2 meters tall, staffs, vessels, and another, even stranger mask, one with eyes protruding several centimeters. These masks weren't just art objects, but part of a ritual. Scholars believe they were placed not on faces, but on statues, possibly depicting gods. One of the figures held a tree-like object, perhaps a symbol of the union of earth and sky. Legends from the Sichuan region tell of the Shu people, a great kingdom that vanished without a trace. Its rulers were believed to be able to communicate with spirits through the light emanating from golden masks. When the sky stopped responding, the city was swallowed by a river. For a long time, these stories were dismissed as myths until the discoveries at Sanxingdui proved otherwise. The Shu civilization did indeed exist, but vanished suddenly, leaving everything behind, as if its people had vanished overnight. Many masks showed signs of destruction. They were intentionally broken before burial. This ritual resembled a symbolic closing of the eyes of the gods. Perhaps the inhabitants believed that by destroying the faces of their patrons, they would end their power or protect themselves from their wrath. But another theory is that the masks were broken to seal the energy contained within. Some researchers have noticed that the lines on the foreheads and cheeks create a pattern reminiscent of a star map. Perhaps each mask corresponded to a specific celestial body. There are also hypotheses about the extraterrestrial origin of these images. The proportions were too unnatural: elongated skulls, almond-shaped eyes, long fingers on the bronze figures. Skeptics believe this is simply an artistic style, but it is difficult not to notice that no other Chinese culture knew such forms. They had nothing in common with either the northern peoples or the Yellow River cultures. Researchers have put forward a bold theory. Perhaps Sanxingdui was the center of an independent civilization that disappeared as a result of a natural disaster. During excavations, scientists discovered a layer of ash and traces of a severe fire. Perhaps the city was destroyed by an eruption or earthquake, after which people abandoned the valley, leaving the gods buried underground. But something else is strange. The artifacts were hidden too carefully, as if they were deliberately placed in the pits as part of a specific ritual. Some objects stood upright, others were arranged in a circle. This resembled a ritual burial, not of objects, but of ideas. When modern conservators first restored the gold mask, it proved to be eerily expressive. Its eyes, staring straight ahead, seemed to peer through time. In the laboratory where the artifact was displayed, staff noted a strange sensation. When the lighting changed, the pupils seemed to move. In one exhibition, it was placed under glass, and visitors noticed the reflection mimicking their movements with a slight delay. Of course, this was merely a trick of the light, but many left the room with a feeling of unease. Scholars continue to debate how the Shu culture could have achieved such a level of artistic and technical mastery. Their bronze castings surpassed anything existing in China at the time, and their symbolism clearly had no roots in traditional Chinese mythology. This has led some historians to suggest that Sanxing Dui is not simply a forgotten branch of Chinese civilization, but a distinct cultural lineage that disappeared before the rest of the world had a chance to recognize it. Today, the Golden Mask is kept in the Quanghan Museum and is considered one of China's most precious finds. But even here, under the glow of the museum's lamps, it doesn't seem like a dead relic. Something unsettling lingers in its cold gleam, the memory of those who saw the world with different eyes. Perhaps they truly saw what humanity is no longer destined to see. And as it silently watches visitors through the display case, it seems as if the Shu gods are still waiting to be remembered again by a name long since erased from the Earth's memory. The Luoyang flying mirrors are a device that reflects the future. The ancient city of Luoyang, located on the banks of the Yi River, is renowned as the cradle of Chinese civilization. Here, among countless temples and tombs, archaeologists have uncovered thousands of bronze mirrors, but a few stood out from the rest. These mirrors, found in the tombs of noble rulers of the Eastern Han dynasty, possessed a property that defied explanation. When sunlight fell on their polished surfaces, an image appeared on the walls that wasn't present on the surface itself. It was as if the mirror weren't reflecting, but revealing, as if something hidden could be seen through the metal. The first recorded instance was in the early 19th century, when restorers noticed a strange phenomenon. A reflected beam from a bronze mirror projected a pattern etched on its reverse side. This seemed impossible, as the front side was completely smooth. However, the phenomenon was repeated, and not just in one copy. Later, such artifacts became known as magic mirrors of Luoyang. People believed they could reveal the truth by reflecting not the external, but the internal. Research revealed that the mirrors were made of a special alloy of copper, tin, and lead. Their surface was polished for weeks to a near-perfect finish, but the most astonishing feature was their microscopic structure. The thickness of the metal layer varied by fractions of a millimeter, creating barely noticeable ridges that were undetectable to the human eye. When illuminated by sunlight, the light refracted and reflected in such a way that a light projection of the pattern applied to the back appeared on the wall. The effect was so precise that modern physicists acknowledge that it would be nearly impossible to create something similar by hand. But ancient masters did this by the hundreds. The Hainan Museum houses dozens of mirrors, each with a unique design. Solar gods, dragons, symbols of good fortune, and texts about eternity. Some images appear only under certain light angles, while others are visible only by moonlight, giving rise to legends of night mirrors in which one can see the future. Tang Dynasty monks wrote that these mirrors were used in divination rituals. A priest would place them in front of a fire and observe what images would appear on the wall, believing them to be messages from the spirits. Modern experiments have confirmed that the phenomenon is based on the complex physics of reflection, but how the craftsmen achieved such precision without optical instruments remains a mystery. Creating the effect required, controlling the pressure and temperature of the metal during cooling, as well as the degree of polishing, which alters the surface micro-relief. Any slight deviation would have destroyed the illusion. It appears that ancient artisans possessed a skill that modern science calls nanotechnology. In Luoyang's mirror treatises, we find the words, "The metal that preserves the image of heaven sees what is not in this world." Some researchers believe this is more than just a poetic metaphor. They believe mirrors could have served not only as decorative objects, but also as instruments for measuring light. Mirrors were found in one tomb, arranged at an angle to one another, creating a complex system of reflections. When archaeologists directed a beam of light at them, it refracted repeatedly, forming a pattern of concentric rings. This may have been an ancient prototype of an optical device designed for observing the sun. There's also a mystical version. One Song Dynasty text states that mirrors were used in temples for contemplating the soul. Supposedly, priests looked into them not with their eyes, but with their hearts, and if the surface remained transparent, the person was pure. If spots of light appeared on it, it was considered a sign of impending disaster. To this day, some villages in Henan province still hold the belief that a mirror can reveal death. People avoid pointing it into the dark to avoid triggering a vision, and instead, store mirrors face down. One of the most mysterious artifacts was discovered in 1968. It's a mirror, 20 centimeters in diameter, with a stunningly smooth surface and an inscription about immortal spirits. When sunlight hits it, an image appears on the wall in the form of an ancient hieroglyph, meaning truth. Modern methods were only able to replicate this effect after extensive computer calculations and laser scanning. But even then, craftsmen acknowledged that the level of surface control in the original was greater than what a human could achieve by hand. Scholars believe the masters relied on knowledge passed down from generation to generation. They may not have understood the physical nature of the phenomenon, but they knew how to achieve results through practice and meditation. Some monasteries even preserved scrolls with the following instructions: "Listen to the metal while it is soft, and it will show you light." This phrase has given rise to many interpretations. Some believe it refers to the sound of bronze cooling, while others believe the masters actually worked by focusing on the subtle vibrations of the material. The magical mirrors of Luoyang remain one of the most beautiful mysteries of ancient China. They cannot be simply called works of art. They combine science, religion, and something that defies conventional understanding. When you gaze at their glittering surface, reflecting light and shadow, it seems as if before you is not an object, but a gateway. Transparent, alive, as if ready to reveal not the outside world, but the one hidden within. And perhaps this is why the ancients said that these mirrors do not reflect the present. They reflect a time that has not yet arrived. The cursed bells of Yue, a sound forbidden by the emperor. In southern China, in the green hills of Hubei province, where river moisture collects in misty valleys, archaeologists discovered something that both astonished and alarmed them. These were bronze bells from the Yue dynasty, excavated from an ancient shrine buried beneath silt. They were so ancient and perfect that they sounded without the slightest distortion of tone, despite having lain underground for 2,500 years. But most importantly, their sound had a strange effect. It caused a tremor in the chest and a feeling of heaviness, as if the wave were passing not only through the air, but also through the body. It was this sound that later became known as the forbidden tone. The discovery began in 1956, when workers digging a canal stumbled upon stone slabs concealing an ancient burial site. Beneath them, they found 24 bells, carefully arranged in an arc. Each varied in size, but shared common features: a refined form, clear inscriptions, and perfectly calculated proportions. Each bell produced 2 tones, depending on where it was struck, and its range of sound spanned almost the entire spectrum of modern instruments. But what was initially considered a musical discovery soon took on a mystical tinge. When specialists attempted to play all the bells simultaneously, a low, vibrating sound filled the air, causing those present to become dizzy. Instruments detected weak electromagnetic vibrations, even though there were no metal structures or electrical sources nearby. This is when the term earth resonance first appeared in scientific reports. According to legend, the bells belonged to the ruler of the ancient Yue kingdom, who believed that sound could communicate with the heavens. Priests guarded rhythms and frequencies considered sacred. One of the tones, the lowest, called the voice of the earth, was considered dangerous because its vibrations could upset the balance of the world. Legend has it that once, when the ruler ordered this tone to be played at a solstice festival, the mountains trembled and the sky darkened. After this, the sound was banned and the temple was sealed. Modern acousticians decided to test the legend. When the bells rang again in the laboratory, the low frequency did indeed produce an unusual effect. The waves, reflecting off the walls, interfered, amplifying each other. When the frequencies coincided, the vibrations produced a sensation of pulsation, as if the space around them were trembling. Scientists explained this phenomenon with physics, but no one could understand how the ancient masters achieved such precision. After all, even modern instruments are rarely able to maintain tune for centuries, let alone millennia. The secret of the bells lay in their design. Each had a double chamber, an inner and an outer one, separated by a thin partition. The metal, bronze with a high tin and nickel content, created a complex spectrum of sounds. When struck, both chambers vibrated, producing a beating effect similar to modern acoustic resonators. This proved that Yue's masters weren't just casting bells. They understood the physics of sound. But why one of the tones caused such an unpleasant sensation remained a mystery. In the 2000s, Chinese physicists from Wuhan University conducted a spectral analysis and found that certain bell frequencies coincided with the resonance of the human chest. In other words, at a certain volume, the sound could indeed trigger a biological response. It was this effect that may have given rise to the legend of the voice of the earth. However, when the researchers attempted to reproduce all 24 sounds in their original order, the recording revealed something strange. An additional tone appeared in the low range, which, according to calculations, should not have been present. Some attributed this to a complex interaction of sound waves, others to vibrations of the soil itself. But the elders of nearby villages said it was a response from the temple. They claimed that the bells should not be awakened, as their voices belonged not to people, but to spirits. That same night after the experiment, local residents heard muffled sounds, as if metal were ringing underground on its own. Archaeologists also noted another peculiarity. The bells were decorated with strange symbols, resembling combinations of star charts and hieroglyphs. Their arrangement followed a pattern, pointing toward the northern sky. It's possible the bells were used not only as musical instruments, but also as part of an astronomical ritual, linking sound with the movements of celestial bodies. There's also a more mystical theory. According to ancient chronicles, the ruler of Yue believed that every sound could open a door between worlds. The lower the frequency, the deeper the gate. The bells, he conceived, were meant to create a bridge between the living and the dead, allowing the emperor's soul to hear the music of the universe. But if the balance was disturbed, the spirits could emerge. Perhaps it was out of fear of this that the ritual was banned and the temple sealed. Today, the Yue bells are on display in the Jinzhou City Museum, but even there, they are rarely heard. Each experiment requires special permission. Researchers say that under certain conditions, the metal seems to come alive. Vibrations generate a faint glow on the surface, making the bronze seem to breathe. Visitors feel a slight chill, like a subterranean wind. When the last bell rings, its echo lingers for a long time. It sinks underground, returning as a quiet, almost inaudible echo. Perhaps it's simply resonance, but for many, it seems as if in these moments an ancient power awakens, the very voice that was once ordered to be silenced forever. The ancient pyramid network of Xi'an is the remains of a lost civilization. In the vast plain at the foot of the Qinling Mountains, where the clouds descend almost to the ground, lies a place that even modern Chinese archaeologists whisper about. Here, around the city of Xi'an, are scattered dozens of pyramidal hills covered in grass and shrubs. At first glance, they look like natural elevations, but upon closer inspection, their slopes are too regular, and their sides are oriented precisely to the cardinal directions. Locals call them sleeping mountains, but researchers are increasingly convinced that they are not hills, but artificial pyramids created long before the empires remembered by history. The first reports of mysterious structures emerge in the mid-20th century, when pilots flying over the valley noticed symmetrical formations reminiscent of Egyptian pyramids. One pilot, describing what he saw, wrote of seeing a huge white pyramid towering above all others, its apex shining as if reflecting light. Following this report, Chinese authorities hastened to restrict access to the area, claiming that these were ancient imperial burial mounds. However, research revealed that the grass concealed not just mounds, but complex structures with internal stone walls and smooth tunnels extending deep underground. Later, satellite images confirmed the presence of over 100 pyramids arranged in a specific pattern. Their orientation precisely corresponds to the positions of stellar constellations, in particular, Orion's Belt and the Big Dipper. The complex's geometry was so precise that it differed from the modern coordinate grid by only a few minutes of arc. This indicated that the ancient builders possessed a profound knowledge of astronomy and geometry, rivaling the calculations of ancient mathematicians. Archaeologists have attempted to determine the age of the pyramids, but their results have varied. Some have dated them to the Zhou dynasty, others to the era of the legendary Three Sovereigns, long before written history. Radiocarbon dating of soil from the lower levels has revealed an age of approximately 5,000 years, but there are even bolder estimates, up to 8,000. If these estimates are correct, the Xi'an pyramids predate the Egyptian ones. This discovery calls into question the entire chronology of the development of Chinese civilization. The White Pyramid, described by the pilots, proved particularly mysterious. Its apex is destroyed, but the slope of its faces is perfect, and its height exceeds 60 meters. Scans revealed voids resembling rooms and vertical shafts. It is believed that a royal tomb or sanctuary may be located inside. However, Chinese authorities officially banned excavations, claiming that interference would disrupt the harmony of the earth. Unofficially, archaeologists circulate rumors that researchers did penetrate the pyramid in the 1970s, but their findings are classified. Local legends say that a palace of heaven once stood here, built by beings who came from the stars. They taught people how to grow grain and read the sky, and then departed, leaving the pyramids as landmarks. One legend says that each pyramid is a star gate, connecting the earth and the heavens. People brought offerings there to receive blessings. Ancient Han Dynasty texts mention mountains where gods sleep in stone, and many scholars believe that these structures were the ones originally intended. Some pyramids are connected by underground tunnels, as evidenced by anomalies in the soil structure. Radar studies have revealed the presence of long passages forming a labyrinth-like network. Along some tunnels, areas with elevated magnetic fields have been detected, suggesting veins of metal or hidden unknown objects. These findings have led to the hypothesis that the pyramids may have been part of an energy system powered by the Earth's natural currents. Scholars who adhere to the rational theory claim that the pyramids are simply royal tombs, built for emperors and their families. However, their number and relative positions cast doubt on this. Too many, too precise, too complex. Why build hundreds of identical tombs in perfect symmetry if one would have sufficed? There are no answers. In the 2000s, satellite images revealed that the pyramids were arranged in geometric shapes, triangles, squares, even spirals. One of these lines points directly south toward Giza, sparking speculation about ancient connections between cultures. Legends also suggest that the White Pyramid's base contains a jade slab emitting a faint glow. Some ufologists believe this is the source of magnetic anomalies. Despite official prohibitions, enthusiasts continue to explore the surrounding area. At night, when fog rises over the valley, faint lights sometimes appear on the slopes, as if someone is illuminating the path deeper into the hills. Perhaps it's simply the phosphorescence of minerals, or perhaps the echo of those who built the pyramids still lingers in the stone. Today these hills stand silent, like enormous sentries guarding a secret no one dares to touch. China calls them ancient monuments, but the people call them the hearts of the earth. And when you look down from above at the hundreds of equal forms stretching to the horizon, you can't help but understand. Whoever built this complex, it was created not for power or death, but to commemorate something far greater than man. The Mogao manuscripts are texts that predicted the end of dynasties. On the edge of the Gobi Desert, near the ancient city of Dunhuang, hundreds of caves are hidden in sheer cliffs. Their walls are covered with frescoes depicting celestial beings, monastic scenes, and wheels of reincarnation. These are the Mogao temples, one of the most sacred sites in the Buddhist world. But beyond art, they house something far more mysterious. Scrolls, manuscripts, and texts written on silk and the finest paper, which, as scholars later discovered, predicted the fate of entire empires. The story of their discovery began in 1900, when a monk named Wang Yuanlu, who tended the caves, noticed a crack in the wall of one of the temples. Behind it lay a narrow room filled with scrolls. When he pulled out the first scroll, he saw an ancient text written in calligraphic script. Thus was discovered the Cave of Manuscripts, a secret repository where documents, prayers, and prophecies had been collected over the centuries. In total, it contained over 50,000 manuscripts, including texts that could not be explained historically. Some of the scrolls contain descriptions of events that occurred hundreds of years after they were written. One mentioned rebellions that destroyed the Tang dynasty. Another, an earthquake that coincided with the chronology of the 12th century catastrophe. Researchers initially assumed these accounts were later forgeries, but radiocarbon dating of the paper revealed that many of the scrolls were created long before the events described. This led to the theory that the texts may have been prophetic messages composed by monks practicing a special state of meditation that allowed them to foresee the future. Among the documents discovered was a mysterious scroll titled The Path of Fire and Wind. It spoke of a time when the sky will darken 3 times and people will no longer hear the singing of birds. Scholars deciphered it as a description of solar eclipses and climate changes coinciding with the fall of the Tang dynasty. Other texts contain precise calculations of astronomical cycles and predictions concerning harvests and floods. Remarkably, all of them matched historical data. Some researchers believe the Mogao monks possessed a system of natural observation that allowed them to predict catastrophes. Others believe they perceived the world as a unified whole, where changes in the stars and winds directly affected the fate of empires. In their understanding, prophecy was not a supernatural act, but a precise knowledge of patterns. However, some of the inscriptions remain unclear. One states, "A stone will rise above the desert, and the voice of silence will cover the earth." Another text mentions a golden river in the sky, a description that matches modern observations of the Milky Way, but is written as if the author saw it in motion. Even stranger was the fate of the manuscripts themselves. Why were so many documents hidden and sealed? According to one theory, the monks feared intrusion and wanted to preserve the sacred texts. But the door wasn't simply sealed, it was carefully insulated with clay mixed with rare minerals to protect against moisture. Such attention to preservation suggests that the scrolls concealed not only knowledge, but also a secret. Some historians have hypothesized that among them were texts contradicting official doctrine and were deliberately hidden to prevent them from being destroyed during the purges. When the first scrolls reached Europe, researchers were astonished by the diversity of languages: Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, Sogdian, even Old Persian. This meant that the Mogao caves were a crossroads of cultures, a place where East and West merged. But the strange thing was that many prophetic texts were repeated in different languages, as if someone had copied the same words across centuries and thousands of kilometers. It was as if the idea embedded within them belonged to no single nation, but was passed down from era to era. Among Buddhist texts, researchers discovered a small, untitled scroll. Its translation was truly shocking. It spoke of a time when people will create eyes that do not belong to the body and ears that have no form. Then, according to the author, the world will hear itself and be afraid. Scholars interpreted these lines as a symbolic prophecy of a future where technology will allow humanity to see and hear from a distance. Such a prediction seemed impossible for an ancient text. It remains unknown who decided to hide the scrolls in the cave and why. Some of them were clearly created by different people in different eras, but they were collected together, as if according to a preconceived plan. Perhaps the Mogao monks believed that a time would come when humanity would once again be ready to hear their messages. In Chinese philosophy, there is the concept of the return of light, the moment when forgotten truths return to the world. Perhaps this is precisely what the cave's guardians were preparing for. Today, the Mogao manuscripts are housed in museums around the world, but even with all the technological advances in their study, the sense remains that these texts contain more than can be read. It seems as if, behind the delicate silk scrolls, there is a voice speaking from the depths of time, that history moves in circles, and the end always resembles the beginning. When the wind rises in the caves and sand settles on the frescoes, it seems as if the texts are whispering again, warning of what is to come, just as they once warned those who failed to believe. Liu Bang's mechanical bird is the first Chinese airplane. In ancient chronicles from the Western Han Dynasty, there's a short, almost inconspicuous entry. Emperor Liu Bang had a bird made of wood that flew on the wind and returned to the master's hands. For a long time, historians considered these words a poetic image, a symbol of power. But several decades ago, something was discovered in Shandong province that forced a re-examination of the legend. Among the remains of an ancient forge, in layers of coal and ash, archaeologists stumbled upon a set of bronze parts, charred yet remarkably complex. They consisted of interconnected gears, axles, and thin plates, crafted with a precision unattainable by ordinary artisans. Upon examination, it became clear this was a mechanism simulating flight. Each detail served a specific purpose. The plates resembled feathers, but they weren't decorative. Their edges bore signs of wear, as if they were in motion. The gears were connected to a system of levers, and one of the plates retained the traces of a spring, made from a thin bronze sheet wound into a spiral. Scholars debated the matter for a long time, but ultimately concluded that they were looking at the remains of an ancient mechanical device, possibly designed to demonstrate the principle of flight. Local sources called it Liu Bang's celestial bird. According to chronicles, at the end of the 3rd century BC, a master named Gong Shun, nicknamed Windmaker, served in the emperor's entourage. He was credited with inventing carts propelled by wheels that indicated direction, and bronze figures capable of playing flutes driven by moving water. But the most bizarre account claimed that he crafted a bird of copper and wood capable of soaring. The description states that it rose 10,000 steps and landed at the behest of the wind. It may have been a device based on the principles of a glider or an early ornithopter. Modern engineers, having studied the discovered fragments, created a computer model. When assembled from modern materials, it was discovered that the mechanism was indeed capable of reproducing wing movements similar to those of a biological organism. Given sufficient wind strength and a lightweight structure, the model would rise briefly. This confirmed that ancient craftsmen had observed the flight of birds and attempted to recreate it technically. But what was most astonishing was the precision of the mechanics. The bronze axles retained traces of friction, indicating the use of lubricants, likely made from vegetable oils. This demonstrates an understanding of the principles of drag minimization. Moreover, the size ratios of the components followed the golden ratio, the same ratio used in aerodynamic design calculations. One gets the sense that the creator wasn't simply trying to make the mechanism move, but rather understood the fundamentals of balance, weight, and wing lift. Some researchers believe the mechanical bird may not have been a toy, but rather part of a ritual. Bas-reliefs were found in a temple dating back to the Han Dynasty, depicting people raising strange objects with outstretched wings into the sky. These devices may have been used in ceremonies dedicated to the spirits of the wind and sky. In Chinese mythology, birds are mediators between worlds, and perhaps Liu Bang wanted to demonstrate that his power was sanctioned by the heavens themselves. However, some texts tell a different story. The chronicle Shuji mentions that the master who created the bird was exiled after testing it. It is said that it fell on the house of one of the advisors, causing panic. The emperor saw this as a bad omen and ordered the device destroyed. If this is true, the invention's fate could have followed the path of many discoveries ahead of their time. They vanished along with their creators. Later, during the Song Dynasty, chroniclers again wrote about attempts to build flying machines. One alchemist mentioned a man who used bamboo tubes and silk fabric to rise into the air in strong winds. But always nearby was a reference to Liu Bang's ancient story, a warning about the boundaries between earth and heaven. Modern physicists, studying mechanisms from Shandong, discovered traces of a carbon coating similar to graphite on bronze components. This material reduces friction and is used in modern bearings. How craftsmen 2,000 years ago could have come up with such a technique remains a mystery. Perhaps they were simply experimenting with soot and oils, but the result was the same. Today, a reconstruction of Liu Bang's bird is housed in the Science Museum in Xi'an. When researchers launch it, it makes a soft, sighing sound and gently moves its wings, creating a gentle rustling sound. Watching this, one involuntarily experiences a strange feeling, a mixture of admiration and trepidation. Because in this moment, past and future seem to converge. The ancient masters, without any knowledge of the physics of flight, were able to achieve the impossible. There's a saying in Chinese philosophy, "He who makes a tree fly has touched the will of heaven." Perhaps Gong Shun truly did touch it, and his creation became more than just a toy, but a symbol of man's desire to transcend the mundane. And looking at the bronze fragments, which still bear traces of heat and the master's hand, it seems as if this bird is ready to flap its wings today, proving once again that antiquity knew far more about the sky than we are willing to admit. The stone inscriptions of Mount Huashan are a message to the star gods. East of Xi'an, among the jagged cliffs of Mount Huashan, Towering over the Waihei Valley, one can see not just the footprints of ancient pilgrims, but something that seems to transcend human capabilities. On the sheer walls, inaccessible by foot or ordinary ladders, are thousands of signs, symbols, and images carved into the stone with astonishing precision. Some of them are over 100 meters high, and the question of how they came to be there remains unanswered. Locals call these carvings letters from heaven. Legends claim that the gods once descended upon Mount Huashan to leave a message for their descendants. However, archaeologists who first studied this phenomenon in the mid-20th century were unable to explain the method by which the inscriptions were made. The stone is so hard that carving it would have required iron tools and incredible dexterity. However, some of the symbols are polished to a mirror shine, and their surfaces show no signs of impact. When researchers measured the distances between the symbols, they found that they were arranged in precise geometric patterns. Several inscriptions coincide with the positions of bright stars in the constellation Draco, while others precisely replicate the projection of Orion's belt. Plotting their coordinates on a map yields a diagram oriented according to the directions of sunrise and sunset on the solstices. Creating such a celestial map required a knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and navigation far beyond that of ordinary priests. The most astonishing thing is that the inscriptions glow in the moonlight. This isn't a metaphor. In some places, the stone is covered in a thin layer of minerals that reflect the moonlight differently than the rest of the rock. Scientists have determined that this is a rare calcium phosphate found in cave formations. How it could have been carved onto the sheer cliffs remains a mystery. Perhaps the ancient craftsmen used ropes and bridges, but no trace of any fastenings remains. The content of the inscriptions also defies decipherment. Some symbols resemble ancient yin symbols, while others are forms unknown to Chinese writing. Some researchers see them as pictograms describing celestial phenomena, comets, constellations, and solar eclipses. Others believe they are a form of sacred writing intended for the gods, not humans. Several symbols are repeated on ancient bronze vessels found hundreds of kilometers away, suggesting the spread of a single cult. In the mid-1990s, a group of geophysicists conducted a magnetic survey of the area and discovered a strange anomaly. The rock with the inscriptions had an elevated magnetic field. Some have speculated that ancient artists may have used the stone's magnetic properties to navigate or record their drawings. There is even a theory that the symbols were created using heating and cooling, a sudden temperature change that creates micro cracks. However, there are no signs of thermal influence. Legends of Mount Huashan tell of gods writing on stone with light. They supposedly descended on golden clouds and left burning symbols on the rock, which cooled and turned to stone. Folk songs say that each symbol represented a prayer, and if recited in the correct order, one could open the sky. Some researchers have attempted to view the inscriptions as a musical score. They are arranged in pitch, like notes on a ruler, and may have created a sound pattern that was intended to be reproduced by voice or the ringing of bells. There are even more sinister theories. On the lower sections of the wall, scenes reminiscent of sacrifices are visible. People standing in a circle extend their hands toward a glowing sphere in the center. Perhaps Huashan was the site of an ancient cult associated with celestial fire or meteorites. Geologists have indeed discovered traces of impact minerals in the soil, confirming that a meteorite may have once fallen here. Perhaps ancient people perceived this event as a manifestation of the gods and immortalized it on the rock. When the sun sets, the cliffs of Huashan begin to shimmer with shades of bronze and silver, and the symbols seem to come alive. Even modern climbers admit to feeling an inexplicable sense of awe and reverence as they ascend. Veteran expeditions report that at night, the mountain emits dull sounds, like distant drum beats. Scientists attribute this to air movement in the crevices, but locals are certain it's the gods reminding people that their message is still alive. Today, the inscriptions are carefully guarded, and only a few scholars are granted permission to study them. But even with today's technology, no one has been able to fully decipher these texts. Perhaps they were not written for the human eye, or in an earthly language. Perhaps they are not a message, but a key encrypted in stellar geometry, a memory of a time when heaven and earth still spoke the same language. And when the moon rises over Huashan and the cold light glides across the ancient symbols, it seems as if the mountain truly breathes. Its surface glows soft silver, as if responding to an invisible call, and then it becomes clear. If the gods once truly left traces on the earth, then perhaps it was here that they decided that human memory should be carved not in words, but in stone, facing directly to the sky. The secret of the jade discs is the ancient code of immortality. For thousands of years in China, jade was considered not just a stone, but a substance that connected man to heaven. It was used to decorate sacrificial altars, tombs, and to cover the bodies of rulers in the belief that this stone had the power to hold the soul. But among all jade artifacts, discs, perfectly round plates with a hole in the center, hold a special place. They are found throughout ancient China, from the coast to the mountainous provinces, and each one holds a secret, the meaning of which is lost in the mists of time. Discs date back to the Neolithic Liangzhu culture, over 4,000 years ago. They were crafted by hand, without metal or grinding tools, using only sand, water, and patience. This labor was incredibly arduous. A single disc could take years, sometimes decades to complete. But for what purpose? They bear no traces of everyday use, no holes for wearing, no signs of wear. Clearly their purpose was sacred. The first written mention of discs is found in the Book of Rituals, which states that the jade circle symbolizes heaven. It was used in rituals, offering it to the spirits. However, over time, the meaning of these objects began to change. Archaeologists find them in tombs, placed on the chest, stomach, and arms of the deceased. According to Taoist beliefs, the hole in the center is the gateway through which the soul passes from one world to another. But some finds suggest that these discs may have had another, more complex meaning. At the beginning of the 20th century, an unusual specimen was discovered in Jianshan County, an extremely thin disc, its surface covered with tiny spirals arranged in perfectly even rows. Under a microscope, each spiral was revealed to have the shape of a double wave, reminiscent of a modern recording of vibrations. Physicists who examined the artifact hypothesized that the pattern could record sound or vibration data, like an ancient analog of a phonograph. If true, the discs could have been a kind of recording of prayers, transmuted into stone. Other specimens demonstrate a remarkable geometrical correspondence with natural proportions. The diameter of the discs is always a multiple of certain numbers, 3, 6, 9, which in Chinese cosmology signify the harmony of heaven, earth, and man. This led researchers to believe that the discs were used as tools for calculation or meditation. Perhaps they served to attune the mind. By concentrating on the hole in the center, a person entered a state that brought them closer to enlightenment. Legends say that great emperors held jade discs to the sun to see the reflection of the gates of heaven in them. Supposedly, at a certain angle, the stone would glow from within, opening the way to immortality. Modern experiments have shown that some types of jade do indeed possess photoluminescent properties. When heated or exposed to strong light, they emit a soft green light. Perhaps the ancient masters were aware of this effect and considered it a manifestation of the breath of heaven. One artifact found in Henan province aroused particular interest. Its surface is covered with a barely visible network of microscopic lines, forming a pattern reminiscent of a star map. Modern astronomers compared the coordinates and discovered a coincidence with the position of stars in the constellation compass. This suggests that the disk was not simply a ritual object, but an instrument used to determine celestial cycles. Perhaps the jade served as a mirror, reflecting the movement of the stars, and helped priests calculate the moments of the changing eras. But among the many rational hypotheses, there's also a mystical one. Taoist alchemists believed that jade could accumulate qi energy. The hole in the center of the disc, they said, allowed one to inhale the breath of heaven, while the smooth surface trapped it. Thus, a vicious circle of immortality was created. Some treatises say that if the disc is placed on the chest of the deceased, their soul will be able to return when the qi energy refills the body. Perhaps this is why 7 discs are found in some tombs, the number of stars in the Ursa Major constellation, associated with eternal life. In the 20th century, Chinese researchers discovered that many discs emit a weak electromagnetic field. Its nature remains unclear, but some physicists attribute it to the structural properties of jade. Others cautiously speculate that ancient artisans may have selected stones that responded to the Earth's magnetic field, using them in rituals that emphasized contact with the cosmos. Today, these jade discs can be seen in museums, where they glow with a soft, almost lifelike light. People who gaze upon them report experiencing a strange sense of calm, as if time stands still for a moment. Perhaps this is precisely what the ancient masters were striving for, to halt the flow of life, to transform a moment into eternity, enclosing it within the circle of stone. And when, in the dim light of the exhibition hall, light falls through the disc's opening and recedes, seemingly disappearing, it seems not reflected but absorbed by the jade, like breath. Then it becomes clear. These discs are not simply a symbol of the sky. They were an attempt to capture infinity itself, to hold it in the palms of one's hands, and perhaps to open the way to where man and star become one. The tomb of Princess Dai, a body that resists time. On the outskirts of Changsha, in Hunan province, in the middle of the last century, archaeologists stumbled upon a tomb that revolutionized our understanding of ancient China. Hidden beneath a layer of clay and charcoal was the burial of a woman who lived more than 2,000 years ago, during the Western Han Dynasty. Her name is known from silk scrolls found nearby. Xin Jue, wife of Margrave Li Tang, better known as Princess Dai. But it wasn't her title or wealth that astonished scholars, but the fact that her body was incorruptible, as if time had stood still the day the tomb was sealed. When the sarcophagus was opened, everyone expected to see bones, but instead, skin emerged from the darkness, soft, supple, and with its color preserved. Veins were visible beneath the surface, joints flexed, and hair and eyelashes remained intact. It seemed as if the woman was sleeping. Even the internal organs were perfectly preserved, which could not be explained by either natural mummification or known embalming methods. Scientists were forced to admit they were witnessing a phenomenon unlike any other. The princess's tomb was a complex defense system. The outer sarcophagus was made of wood and coated with several layers of lacquer, followed by a layer of charcoal, and finally, white clay, which had water-repellent properties. All this created a hermetically sealed space, keeping out air and microorganisms. But the most mysterious secret lay within. The body lay in a clear liquid, resembling a slightly acidic solution mixed with mercury salts. This compound not only prevented decomposition, but also may have possessed antiseptic properties unknown to modern chemistry. When scientists examined the tissue microstructure, they found that the soft organ cells were intact. Under a microscope, the heart and lungs appeared almost alive. Doctors examining the body claimed that if they hadn't known the age of the find, they would have mistaken it for modern. Even more surprising was the presence of food remains in the stomach: rice, watermelon, and poultry. Their age confirmed a date of death around 160 BC. More than 1,000 objects were found near the sarcophagus: silk scrolls with texts on medicine, herbal infusions, wooden figurines of servants, and vessels containing unknown mixtures. One of the scrolls depicted a human figure with marked lines and points, consistent with modern acupuncture patterns. This proved that even then, the Chinese knew about the subtle energies of the body. Perhaps the secret to preserving the princess's life was related not only to chemistry, but also to a special understanding of energetic balance. Some researchers speculate that the liquid in which the body was buried had ritual significance. One of the texts found in the tomb speaks of water of eternal breath, made from dew and heavenly salt. Perhaps the alchemists at Li Tang's court were attempting to create an elixir of immortality, an idea so popular in the Taoist tradition. If so, the princess's fate was the result of an experiment that accidentally proved successful. But even with all these hypotheses, the question remains: why has no other body been found in such a state of preservation for 2,000 years? Analysis shows that the humidity, pressure, and temperature inside the tomb remained nearly constant, like in a sealed incubator. Perhaps the combination of factors was unique. However, some researchers see this not as a coincidence, but as the manifestation of a lost technology. They argue that ancient craftsmen were able to control the microclimate by using the interaction of charcoal, clay, and organic matter, creating a natural preservation effect. When the sarcophagus was transported to the laboratory, the liquid began to evaporate, and the body began to lose its elasticity. Scientists rushed to restore the atmosphere, but the process could no longer be stopped. Princess Dai gradually began to change, as if returning to a state of rest. Today, her body is preserved in a special chamber, where the pressure and humidity are maintained at levels similar to those of an ancient tomb. However, strange stories circulate among museum staff. Some claim that at night, a faint scent of lotus, a flower symbolizing immortality, wafts from the laboratory. Others say that instruments sometimes register a slight increase in temperature near the sarcophagus, as if the body were emitting heat. All of this, of course, can be explained by the equipment, but for those who have seen the princess with their own eyes, the sensation is different, as if time truly stood still around her. The tomb of Princess Di remains one of humanity's most astonishing archaeological discoveries. It combines the mysteries of chemistry, medicine, religion, and art. Perhaps this is a coincidence of natural conditions, or perhaps the result of knowledge lost, along with an era that knew how to control life itself. When you look at the serene face of a woman who has survived 20 centuries, it's hard to shake the feeling that she still holds a secret, one that has kept her untouched by time. And perhaps this secret lies not in substances and formulas, but in the very idea, the belief that life should never end. After all, if a person believes in eternity, then perhaps it truly reciprocates their feelings. A sunken temple off the coast of Shandong is a dragon sanctuary. On China's east coast, where the cold waves of the Yellow Sea wash against the rocky cliffs of Shandong province, fishermen often report strange flashes of light underwater. Sometimes they see the outlines of stairs and columns through the thick waves, as if a city were dormant beneath the sea. For a long time, this was considered a legend until, in 2002, a group of divers exploring the area near Cape Chengshan discovered underwater ruins extending almost 30 meters into the sea. They stumbled upon a complex stone platform, steps, and arches resembling a temple. Thus began the story of the mysterious underwater sanctuary, which locals call the Dragon Temple. When the first underwater footage revealed massive blocks perfectly fitted together, it became clear this was not a natural formation. The slabs formed rectangular halls with corridors and arches, and at an angle, a long staircase led to a platform on which, according to researchers, stood a central altar. The strangest thing was the relief images on the walls, the curved bodies of dragon-like creatures, their heads turned toward the sea. Their scales and eyes are still visible, despite the stone having been exposed to salt water in time. Researchers have put forward many theories. Some believe the temple was built during the late Shang dynasty, approximately 3,000 years ago, when the coast was much further from today's sea level. Another theory suggests it is the remains of an unknown coastal culture that sank as a result of an earthquake or rising waters. But there's a third mystical side. Legends of the region say there was a sanctuary here where sea dragons, guardians of rain and tides, were worshipped. People made sacrifices to them to prevent floods. When the ruler violated the ritual one day, the sea rose and swallowed the temple and all its votaries. Geological studies have shown that the water level did indeed rise several times in ancient times, but the symmetry of the buildings and the complex architecture cannot be explained by a simple natural disaster. The interior passages are oriented according to the cardinal directions, and the central staircase aligns with the direction of sunrise on the summer solstice. This attests to the structure's profound astronomical and religious significance. During their dives, divers also recorded other oddities. In some chambers, the water remained noticeably warmer than outside, and instruments showed a faint glow in the ultraviolet range. Analysis of the sediments revealed traces of rare minerals similar to those found in tectonic faults where the Earth's energy is released. Perhaps the ancient builders deliberately erected the temple on this site, considering it a place of power. On one of the stones, researchers found an image resembling a star map. At the center is a symbol resembling a dragon's eye, surrounded by lines leading to 7 points. This may be a reference to the constellation Ursa Major, traditionally associated with celestial dragons. The temple may have served not only as a place of worship, but also as an observation center, connecting the movements of the stars with the tides and rainfall. Some architectural elements astonished the engineers. The stone blocks were joined not with mortar, but by a tightly fitted method, with barely visible seams. Even after millennia, waves could not separate them. Fragments of columns engraved with symbols of water and wind were preserved inside the halls, as well as traces of bronze fastenings that likely held ornaments or statues. One fragment recovered from the seabed turned out to be part of a metal figurine depicting a creature with the body of a snake and the face of a human. Analysis revealed an alloy of copper and zinc with traces of unknown elements not found in ancient Chinese techniques. Locals claim that during strong storms, a low rumble, like breathing, can be heard from beneath the water. Fishermen avoid fishing near the ruins, claiming the underwater currents behave strangely. Boats are swung into the wind, and nets tear, as if someone is pulling them down. A popular belief in the villages is that the temple is still alive, and that the dragons sleeping in its depths awaken when the sea is disturbed by humans. Scientists have yet to find an explanation for this phenomenon. Some attribute the hum to methane bubbles escaping from the seabed, others to the acoustics of the stone halls. But the sound recorded by the hydrophone was indeed unusual. It had a distinct rhythmic structure, reminiscent of a pulse. This fact has sparked new debate. Perhaps the temple was built to resonate with the sea waves, transforming the water's energy into sound, which was perceived as the breathing of the gods. Since then, underwater excavations have been rare, sea currents are unpredictable, and the temple's walls are too fragile. However, one fact remains undeniable. The structure was created with astonishing precision and a design that went beyond utilitarian architecture. It clearly served as a place of communion between man and the elements. When underwater lights illuminate the dragon sculptures, they seem to move through the water, brought to life by the pressure of the depths. Their eyes, carved thousands of years ago, reflect the spotlights, as if watching those who dare disturb their peace. And looking into these stone faces, you can't help but feel that the ancients didn't just believe in their gods. They may have actually lived alongside them. The legend of the Milk Lily River. On the border of Hunan and Guangxi provinces flows a narrow, almost forgotten river, known locally as the Baihe, the White River, or, as ancient chronicles translate, the Milk Lily. On clear days, its water truly does have an unusual pearlescent hue, as if someone had dissolved light in it. But locals say this color is no accident. It's as if something ancient and sacred slumbers beneath its surface. And when the water becomes especially clear, you can see the outlines of walls, stone slabs, and smooth lines, as if from a city buried in silt. The first stories about the underwater rocks date back to the 19th century, when farmers noticed strange geometric shapes on the bottom. During droughts, when the water receded, smooth blocks decorated with patterns of waves and spirals would rise from the silt. People called this place the Goddess's Bed, claiming that a temple dedicated to the mistress of the rains once stood there. But as soon as the rains came, the water quickly returned, hiding everything once again. In the 20th century, geologists conducted a survey and confirmed that the remains of man-made structures were indeed located beneath the river. Using echo sounders, they detected rectangular structures up to 30 meters long, sloping toward the hills. One of the layers turned out to be fused sandstone, so dense that it couldn't be penetrated by a drill. Remarkably, these blocks were joined at exactly 90 degrees, like those in fortress walls. Archaeologists have put forward several hypotheses. According to one, this was once the site of an ancient city from the Zhou dynasty, destroyed by a catastrophic flood. Another theory links Baihe to the legend of a river where dragons drank the milk of the earth. Perhaps local residents observed limestone springs erupting, turning the water white, and over time, this gave rise to the myth. But matters became more complicated when divers discovered inscriptions resembling ancient hieroglyphs on one of the submerged rocks. They were barely discernible, but they repeated the symbol, meaning gate. When scientists attempted to lift one of the blocks to the surface, it crumbled upon contact with air. The water-saturated minerals turned into a porous mass. It then became clear. If a city truly existed beneath the river, it could not be removed without destruction. All that remained was to observe. Since then, expeditions have been using underwater cameras. Video recordings show staircases leading underground, columns, and even traces of carved ornaments covered in mud. Local legends say that a woman with the power to make rain once lived here. She came from afar and built a temple by the water. People brought her lilies, asking for fertility. But one day, the villagers broke their vow and desecrated the shrine. Then the goddess struck the ground with her staff, and the water rose, engulfing everything around her. Since then, every year at the beginning of summer, the river flashes with a white light, a reminder of her wrath. Hydrochemists studied the water's composition and discovered microscopic crystals of calcite and quartz. These are what create the milky effect by scattering sunlight. However, the origin of these crystals remains mysterious. Calculations show that their concentration is too high for normal soil. This may indicate the presence of an underground spring ejecting minerals from the depths. If so, ancient inhabitants may have perceived this phenomenon as a miracle, a river glowing from within. One night, during observations, the researchers noticed a faint glow underwater. The light emanated from a narrow fissure where the current was particularly strong, The camera captured the movement of gas bubbles, and traces of mineral deposits on the walls formed a pattern reminiscent of intertwining lilies. When the images were shown to local elders, they said it was a sign from a goddess who still breathes underground. Nowadays, pilgrims come here. They throw white petals into the river to appease the spirit of water. It is believed that if the flowers float for a long time, rather than sink, the year will be fruitful. Scientists attribute this to a thin layer of air on the leaves, but even among them, many admit to feeling a strange energy in this place, as if the earth itself were vibrating. During the most recent expedition, seismographs recorded weak ground pulsations coinciding with high tides. This confirmed that the river is connected to underground streams. However, it remains unclear why the underwater stone structures remain stable despite the ground movement. Perhaps ancient architects knew how to harness the power of water to strengthen structures rather than destroy them. Today, the Milk Lily River appears calm. Its surface shimmers in the sunlight, and in the silence, only a murmuring sound, like breathing, can be heard. But if you listen closely, it seems as if a faint echo can be heard beneath the water, as if someone is speaking from the depths. Perhaps it's simply the sound of the current, or perhaps the voice of an ancient city still waiting to be heard. And while white flowers float above the river, it continues to hold its secret, the legend of a sanctuary that has not disappeared, but merely hid beneath the water, to one day rise again into the light. The Bronze Man's prophecy foretells the end of the empire. In ancient China, at the turn of the late Han Dynasty and the Three Kingdoms in Sichuan province, there was a legend of a bronze statue capable of speech. It was called the Bronze Man of Yudu, a being supposedly created by order of the emperor to protect the city from disasters. For centuries, no one believed this story, until in 1974, during excavations near Chengdu, archaeologists actually found fragments of a huge bronze figure, fragments of a torso, a hand, and a fragment of a face with a half-open mouth and a complex internal structure clearly intended for more than just decorative purposes. From that moment on, the ancient legend took on a sinister reality. The figure, according to reconstructions, stood almost 3 meters tall. Inside the body were channels leading to the chest and mouth, as if air or liquid were supposed to flow through them. Traces of carbon deposits were visible on the inner surface of the metal. Scholars have suggested that the statue may have been more than just a symbol, but a device, perhaps an ancient acoustic instrument capable of producing sounds when a current of air passed through it. This would explain the stories of a talking idol, whose words supposedly foretold the fate of rulers. According to chronicles, the statue was erected in the 3rd century BC during the reign of a local governor. The priests believed that the spirit of the earth resided within it. Whenever the authorities began to abuse the people, the Bronze Man would sigh and groan, warning of approaching unrest. Such reports are recorded in the chronicles several times. The last time was on the eve of the fall of the Han Dynasty, when, according to eyewitnesses, the statue emitted a sound similar to human weeping. A year later, the empire fell. When archaeologists attempted to reconstruct the statue's workings, they discovered the remains of a complex system of valves and cavities inside. When air was pumped through one of the channels, a low, muffled tone, reminiscent of a human voice, emanated from the opening in the chest. This was not a defect, but a carefully calculated acoustic system. Modern engineers have compared it to a Helmholtz resonator, a device that only appeared in the 19th century. This has led to the hypothesis that the Bronze Man could actually speak, not on its own, but as part of a ritual in which priests manipulated the flow of air or flame, creating the illusion of prophecy. But over time, the statue's significance expanded beyond its technical significance. It began to be perceived as a symbol of the empire's conscience. When the country suffered from wars and corruption, people would come to the Bronze Man, ask for advice, and leave clay figurines at his feet, representations of their sins. After each period of turmoil, the statue was damaged and then restored, as if the country itself were dying and being reborn with it. The fragments discovered by archaeologists bear traces of blows. The statue was likely destroyed in a fit of rage, perhaps on the orders of officials fearful of its prophecies. But folk legends say otherwise. The Bronze Man split from within when a fire broke out in the heart of the empire. At the same time, a fireball was allegedly observed over Chengdu, illuminating the sky for several minutes. Geologists note that traces of a meteorite fall dating to the same time have indeed been recorded in this region. Whether by chance or coincidence, in legend, this event marked the end of the Old World. Some historians speculate that the Bronze Man may have been used as a device for observing natural phenomena. Its internal channels could have detected vibrations in the earth, and sounds were generated by changes in pressure or magnetic flux. In this sense, the prophecies were not mystical, but a reflection of geophysical processes. If this is true, then the ancient craftsmen created something akin to a seismograph, a device that warned of catastrophes. According to another version, the statue was part of a ritual performed by Taoist alchemists, who believed that bronze could accumulate the breath of the earth, qi. When it accumulated in excess, the metal began to vibrate. The priests then considered this a sign. The elements needed to be appeased. This also explained the appearance of ash inside the body. Perhaps a sacrificial fire burned there, creating a temperature difference and causing vibrations. When archaeologists completed the restoration, they displayed the fragments in the Provincial Museum. On the day of the opening, according to witnesses, the lights in the hall went out, and for a moment, a short metallic hum was heard, as if someone had struck an empty vessel. The electrical system did not detect any overload, but many who heard the sound froze. So unexpectedly did it resemble a low, human sigh. After this incident, the museum decided not to attempt to reassemble the statue. Today, the Bronze Man stands behind glass, illuminated by a soft light. His face is half lost, but his lips seem still parted. And when you look at him, it's hard to shake the feeling that he really could speak, if only a breeze blew through the ancient canals. Perhaps he will say the same thing he said 1,000 years ago. That power, once disconnected from the people, always destroys itself. And perhaps that's precisely why the Bronze Man no longer prophesies anything, because his warning still resonates like an echo within history itself. The stone books of Mount Tai are the encrypted history of dynasties. Mount Tai, towering above the plains of Shandong province, has long been considered the most sacred in the Celestial Empire. Here, emperors offered sacrifices to heaven and earth. Here, according to legend, spirits decided the fate of nations. But in the early 20th century, monks exploring one of the side peaks came across strange boulders embedded tightly into the slope. Each slab was polished like the pages of a book and covered with a multitude of tiny carved symbols. These symbols did not belong to any known script. When sunlight struck the stone at just the right angle, the lines formed a pattern resembling lines of text. Thus began the story of the stone books of Mount Tai, a mysterious archive that no one has yet been able to decipher. The first scientific study was conducted in 1924. Geologists confirmed that the rock was not local. These slabs had been brought and artificially inserted into the slope. A total of 48 pages were found, arranged in 3 rows like on a shelf. Each is approximately 10 centimeters thick and as tall as a human. Thousands of lines are visible on the surface, but not a single one is repeated. Only at the bottom of some slabs can fragments of ancient Chinese characters be discerned, names, dates, titles, but they are connected to patterns that resemble diagrams rather than text. Ancient chronicles do indeed mention the stone annals of Taishan. Legend has it that every emperor who ascended the mountain was required to leave a mark of his authority, carving words of thanksgiving to the heavens on the rock. But the symbols discovered do not resemble traditional inscriptions. Perhaps they represented a code, a system used by priests to record not events, but rhythms, the movements of the stars, the tides, and eclipses. When researchers scanned the surface with a laser, they discovered a repeating pattern in the depth of the lines, a uniform fluctuation in the depth of the carving. These fluctuations corresponded to the cycles of the moon. This suggested that the stone books were a kind of calendar, with each line corresponding to 1 month or year. If the decipherment were accurate, the entire complex would span over 5,000 years, an era before writing existed. But there were other discoveries too. X-ray analysis revealed hollow channels running along the seams inside some of the slabs. They were filled with a thin layer of a mineral similar to mica. When electrical impulses were passed across the stone's surface, a faint response was produced, as if the structure were reacting to the current. Physicists theorized that ancient craftsmen may have used the piezoelectric properties of quartz to create sounding stones. This led to a new theory. The mountain library wasn't intended to be read visually. It was read by sound, as wind passed between the slabs, causing them to vibrate. Monks said that on windy nights, the mountain actually sings. A dull, rhythmic hum, like breathing, emanates from somewhere on the slope. Sometimes it lasts only a few minutes, sometimes an entire night. Scientists explain this by the movement of air in the cracks, but the frequency of the sounds matches the resonance of the human chest. Perhaps the ancient builders knew that this particular range evokes feelings of awe and fear. Among the inscriptions is a particularly enigmatic slab, covered in concentric circles. In the center is a small square inscribed with a single word, turn. Scholars debate its meaning. Some see it as a symbol of the changing eras, others as a reference point, a geographic zero on an ancient map. Legends say that it is here that the heart of the earth is kept, where every sound from the mountain becomes a word, and if you listen closely, you can hear the names of emperors yet unborn. Attempts to translate the symbols have been made repeatedly. Some linguists considered them a form of proto-hieroglyphs, others a geometric cipher, constructed according to the 8 trigrams principle. But each time, researchers encountered inconsistencies. In one of the slabs, the lines form a spiral, matching the shape of a galaxy when viewed from above. Whether this is a coincidence or deliberate symbolism is difficult to say, but the coincidence is striking. Archaeologists attempted to remove several fragments for analysis, but discovered traces of molten quartz inside, as if the stone had been exposed to high temperatures. This suggested that the carvings were not carved but burned by light, perhaps by concentrated reflection of sunlight. Similar methods are known from legends about sky mirrors, devices capable of burning through stone. Today, the stone books are partially closed to visitors. The slope on which they are located is fenced off. Monks living nearby claim that one should not approach the stones at night. They remember the voice of the emperors. Sometimes the wind passing between the slabs does indeed produce a whisper-like sound. Tourists stop, wondering where it's coming from. Perhaps it's simply the cliff's acoustics, but when you hear this rustling, it seems as if the stones themselves are telling a story that humans are not yet able to understand. Thus, Mount Tai preserves its archive, not on paper, not in symbols, but in the very fabric of the earth. Perhaps one day someone will find a way to hear these stones correctly, and then they will speak, telling of the rise and fall of empires, of a time when history was not yet written in ink, but was written with light, wind, and stone. Artifacts from the White Cloud Temple are sacred objects that do not belong to time. In the heart of Beijing, behind ancient ivy-covered gates, stands the White Cloud Temple, one of the oldest Taoist monasteries in China. Its quiet courtyards, permeated with the scent of incense, have for centuries concealed not only monastic cells and libraries, but also what scholars call an impossible collection. One of the inner halls, closed to visitors, houses dozens of artifacts whose origins neither archaeologists nor historians have been able to explain. Each seems to belong to a different era, yet they are all connected by a common mystery, time that defies the usual laws. The temple was first mentioned in chronicles in the 10th century, but the artifacts found there are much older. When the monks allowed an inventory to be conducted in 1960, researchers were astonished. Among the ordinary sacred objects were tools and vessels made of an alloy that did not exist in the ancient world. The metal was lightweight, corrosion-resistant, and gave off a soft blue glow in lamplight. Analysis revealed the presence of elements uncharacteristic of terrestrial ores. This gave rise to rumors of heavenly iron, which, according to legend, Taoists mined from fallen stars. The most mysterious object was a circular disc, the size of a human palm, covered in tiny carved symbols. When it was rotated, the symbols seemed to move, changing shape. Scientists tried to explain the effect as an optical illusion, but microscopic recordings revealed that the lines were indeed changing structure. The monks claimed that the disc reflected the breath of time, a phenomenon in which space responds to human consciousness. Some researchers link this object to myths about the Mirror of Tor, through which one can see the past and future. Next to the disc lay a bronze vessel containing dust of an unknown composition. When it was accidentally opened, the air in the hall changed. Instruments recorded a brief drop in temperature. After this, the monks insisted that the vessel be resealed and not touched again. Ancient texts refer to it as the heart of the cloud, intended to store the vital energy of the mountains. It may have been an alchemical mixture, but what exactly it contained remains unknown to this day. The second mystery is a small crystal found in a niche behind a statue of Lao Tzu. It emits a faint bluish glow, even when placed in complete darkness. When physicists tested the radioactivity level, it was found to be 0. Under a microscope, a tiny symbol is visible inside the crystal, a perfect circle divided into two halves, reminiscent of yin and yang. Some speculate that this is an ancient example of nano-engraving, but monks claim the stone paints its own balance and reacts to the presence of people. When a large crowd of visitors approaches, the glow becomes brighter, as if the crystal senses attention. The vault also contains a strange scroll, written not in ink, but in something resembling glowing gold. At certain angles, the letters disappear, leaving only a smooth cloth. The text on it has been undecipherable. It is neither Chinese nor Tibetan, although individual symbols resemble syllables from ancient mantras. In one place, an inscription in the margins translates as, "the path that returns to oneself." The monks say this scroll can only be read by those who are able to hear the silence. Scientists repeatedly requested permission to fully study the collection, but the monastery always refused. In the Taoist tradition, the artifacts of the White Cloud Temple are considered living, not objects, but forms of energy. According to this teaching, each object is associated with a specific time. Some belong to the past, others to the future. They cannot be viewed in isolation, otherwise the balance is lost. In 2007, a group of researchers conducted spectral scanning through closed display cases. The results were astonishing. Several objects reflected infrared radiation, as if emitting heat. One of them was a stone sphere engraved with lines aligning with the orbits of the planets. It may have been an ancient astronomical instrument, but its material is unknown. Not granite or quartz, but something denser than diamond. There's a belief among monks that the White Cloud Temple stands at the intersection of the Earth's power lines. At night, when fog envelops the rooftops and the bells ring in the wind, the artifacts seem to come alive. The disc spins on its own, the crystal glows more intensely, and a dull ringing can be heard from within the sealed vessel. No one knows if this is true, but everyone who has visited the temple leaves with the feeling that the space around them has changed slightly. Today, the artifacts of the White Cloud Temple remain hidden from outsiders. The monks believe they belong not in museums, but in history itself. And perhaps they are right, for if objects are truly connected to time, then perhaps they await not study, but the return of a moment when their meaning will once again be understood. For now, the temple stands in silence, and in its light, everything seems a little less real, as if the line between past and future has dissolved forever. The jade sword of the last emperor is a blade that extinguishes light. When the dynasty ended in 1912 and the last emperor, Puyi, left the throne, many relics disappeared with him, among them a special sword known as the Jade Blade of Tianlu. It was described as a weapon that never rusted, never dulled, and seemed to absorb light, making the surrounding space slightly darker. Historians considered it a legend until, in the late 20th century, an object appeared in a private repository in Hong Kong that perfectly matched the ancient descriptions. The blade was smooth, the color of mist, and the handle was adorned with an engraving depicting an intertwining of clouds and dragons. And most astonishingly, under bright light, the metal did not reflect a single ray. When specialists began their examination, it turned out that the sword's material was not pure jade, but an alloy of stone and metal, a structure not found in any known mineral. A microscope revealed inclusions of particles capable of absorbing photon radiation. This meant that the blade could indeed extinguish light, converting its energy into heat. No one could understand how such a material could have been created several centuries ago, long before the discovery of such technologies. According to court chronicles, the sword was forged by a master named Chen Li, who lived during the Qing dynasty. Legend has it that he received a commission from the emperor to create a weapon that would preserve the dynasty's peace. For this, he used jade from the Wudong Mountains, where, according to legend, a heavenly firestone fell. This stone possessed a strange property. It turned black in the sun and glowed a soft green at night. The master mixed it with molten bronze, creating a blade that reflected neither the sun nor the moon. The emperor named it Tianlu, the one that holds up the sky. The sword also had dark stories associated with it. It was said that anyone who touched the blade without permission experienced strange dreams. Darkness flowed like liquid, with shadows moving within it. After the fall of the empire, the sword disappeared. According to some sources, it was taken to the northern provinces and given to the family of a monk who served at the White Cloud Temple. But after decades, the trail disappeared. Only in the 2000s did a collector, who wished to remain anonymous, claim to have found it among ancient relics. During their examination, scientists noticed that the blade vibrated slightly when exposed to a magnetic field. When placed under a light source, the lamps indeed dimmed, and cameras produced distorted images. Spectral analysis revealed that the sword absorbed approximately 80% of the visible spectrum. Physicists called this abnormal scattering, but no experiment could reproduce the effect. Then they began to speculate that the blade was not physical in nature, but energetic, an object that absorbed light to maintain a balance between the world of the living and the shadows. Legend has it that Puyi kept the sword with him until the last days of his reign. On the night before his abdication, he ordered it hidden, saying the dynasty would end when the blade saw the sun again. People believe the jade sword is linked to the energy of imperial power, and whoever finds it will gain power over time. It's no coincidence that during the Japanese occupation of Changchun, rumors circulated that Japanese officers were searching for this very blade, but those who tried to touch it allegedly suddenly fell ill or disappeared. When the sword was shown in the laboratory, faint markings, invisible to the naked eye, appeared on its surface. They turned out to be ancient symbols from Taoist texts: silence, eternity, reflection. Under ultraviolet light, a barely noticeable aura of blue light appeared around them. Perhaps these were remnants of ancient varnish, but some believe the runes are activated only by the presence of human energy. One of the researchers later admitted that, while handling the blade, he felt an intense cold, as if the metal were drawing heat from his hands. Today, the jade sword is kept in a private collection, with access strictly restricted. It is only known that the owner keeps it in a sealed capsule, where dim lighting is maintained at all times. He claims that in complete darkness, the sword begins to glow on its own, as if it refuses to fade. Some who have seen it say the light actually comes from within, rather than being reflected. In Chinese tradition, jade symbolizes purity and immortality, but this sword defies conventional understanding. It doesn't preserve light, but rather absorbs it. Perhaps that's why even emperors feared it. After all, if the blade can absorb radiance, perhaps it can do even more, drain the power of time. And when you gaze at its smooth surface, where not even a face is reflected, it seems as if you're looking not at an object, but into a void where the boundaries of life and eternity disappear, leaving only the cold breath of history. The vanished towers of the Gobi are the desert's sentinels, worn away by wind and time. In the heart of the Gobi Desert, where the earth cracks in the heat and the horizon trembles like water, a multitude of stone ruins stand, remnants of structures whose purpose no one can explain. They are called the Towers of Silence. Local nomads claim that dozens of gigantic towers once stood here, connected by lines of clay and stone. But one day, they vanished, as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving only footprints in the sand and strange magnetic shadows visible on satellite images. The first mention of them dates back to the 9th century, when Chinese monks following the Silk Road wrote, "In the land of ash and wind stand towers that glow in the moonlight." For centuries, travelers reported mysterious glowing silhouettes appearing on the horizon at dusk, like mirage cities. It was only in the 20th century that satellite reconnaissance confirmed that the central part of the Gobi does indeed contain regular geometric shapes, invisible from the ground but perfectly symmetrical when viewed from above. When an expedition reached the area in 1989, they discovered the remains of circular platforms up to 50 meters in diameter. Some of them had deep holes lined with baked clay. These holes led down into stone wells from which warm air issued. It was believed that the towers were used as observatories or beacons for caravans, but no traces of stairs or doors were found. The structures appeared to have sunk into the ground rather than risen above it. The most bizarre discovery was made by geophysicists. Radiation and magnetic field levels around the platforms were significantly higher than usual. Compasses malfunctioned, and equipment recorded electrical surges, especially during sandstorms. Some researchers have suggested that the towers may have served as an ancient communication system, perhaps using static electricity and wind currents to transmit signals over long distances. However, there is no evidence to support this. According to Mongolian legends, the Gobi Towers were built not by men, but by those who came from the fires of heaven. These beings supposedly erected them to observe the movements of the stars and control the rains. Later, when they departed, the desert swallowed their creations. Archaeologists who adhere to a scientific approach believe these may be structures of the ancient Xia kingdom, traces of which are lost in the sands. But if this is true, the towers are over 4,000 years old. In the 2000s, researchers used infrared cameras and observed the outlines of ring-shaped structures beneath the surface, extending tens of meters below the surface. Computer reconstruction revealed that the towers formed a spiral pointing due north, with the center of the spiral coinciding with a point where the Earth's magnetic field is particularly unstable. This fact led to the hypothesis that the structures were not defensive, but rather energetic, linked to geomagnetic currents. Locals say lights sometimes appear over this area at night, quiet, motionless, like candles in the fog. Scientists attribute this to possible mineral phosphorescence or atmospheric electricity. But witnesses say the lights don't simply flicker, but move, as if someone were circling invisible towers. After such nights, the sand in the area becomes denser, as if baked, and glistens like glass in the moonlight. In 2010, an expedition from Beijing attempted to drill one of the platforms. At a depth of 15 meters, the drill encountered a cavity from which a blast of hot air emanated. A few minutes later, the shaft collapsed, leaving behind a gaping crack. A low sound, like a distant rumble, emanated from it. Instruments recorded vibrations matching the Earth's resonance frequency. This led some to speculate that a vast system of underground chambers, interconnected like a wind-driven organ, may indeed lie beneath the Gobi. Later, when the sun dispersed the storm, researchers discovered that the tower's outlines in the sand had disappeared, as if the desert itself had decided to hide its traces. Only satellite images preserved the thin lines, stretching for tens of kilometers, and they are still visible if you know where to look. Today, the site where the towers once stood is closed to public expeditions. The official explanation is ecosystem protection. Unofficially, geologists have detected faint thermal radiation beneath the sand, reminiscent of mechanical activity. But, of course, no machinery has been found. Perhaps the desert simply preserves the memory of wind movements, frozen in stone. When the sun sets over the Gobi Desert and the horizon turns crimson, the shadows of towers seem to rise from the sand in the distance, transparent and rippling, as if the grains of sand themselves were remembering their former purpose. And then it becomes clear. Perhaps these towers never disappeared. They simply transformed into another form, becoming the desert's breath, its echo, its silent reminder that even stone can remember light, if it was once alive. Millennia have passed, but the shadows of ancient China still linger underground, in caves, tombs, and forgotten shrines. Every discovered rune, every fragment of jade, reminds us that the history of this land has never belonged solely to the past. Here, time never dies. It changes form, becoming wind, light, the breath of stone. And while people continue to search for answers, the ancient mysteries of the Celestial Empire still gaze upon us from the depths of time, silently guarding their secrets.